This is the Board of County Commissioners work session for August 21st, 2012. We are going to start off our work session by calling a special meeting to approve some resolutions. Is there a motion for a special meeting?
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. So now the Board of County Commissioners in a special meeting. We have three resolutions in front of us. The first resolution is authorizing the library ballot question, and Kathy Chandler and Tom Oken are here to present that issue to us. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, there are actually two ballot questions. One deals with debt and one deals with an increase in the library's operating levy. With respect to the debt question, at first reading, there was a request to bring back an alternate version of the question that included some specific limits as to the maximum interest rate that we would pay on the debt and also maximum term, number of years that we'd issue the debt for. And so in your packet you have the original version and what's called the alternative version. And actually the first item we were going to deal with respect to that question before we moved to that was whether we'd be able to reduce the amounts in the question, because Kathy just got updated construction cost estimates last night, and unfortunately the answer is no. Her cost came in a little higher than anticipated, so we do need to stick with the maximum amount of debt that we'd issue here, which is $5.4 million. And obviously, when we get to that point, if we can issue less, we will. But for now, I'd stick with the amount that's in the question, $5.4 million. And then, secondly, back to the alternate version versus the original version. Does the board have a preference or any questions about that wording?
Board, you have questions for Tom? So do you have preferences for Tom?
I like the newer version. I think it's a little more clear to the voter in terms of what we're asking for. The 25 years, the 6% in there, I think are good additions to be capping that. I mean, obviously, my concern previously was, is this going to come back before us when the bonds are issued? And I think we do a good job in our financial, you in particular, Tom, with looking at our bond rating and making sure that we are getting the best deal for the public when we are borrowing money. I'm not concerned with that, but I just want to make sure that the process is back through us on that, which it is. I asked that question the last time.
Which one is the term of it?
It's page 5, and it's the last two sentences on the first paragraph of the ballot question.
Okay, so
shall bear interest at a maximum net effective interest rate not to exceed 6%, and mature not later than 25 years from the issuance thereof. Those are the two additional limits.
Yes, Rachel.
Thank you. The only other language I was hoping to look for in that sentence, I'm not sure where it could be inserted, would be to mention that we would issue at the best rates available, not to exceed. And what happened to that kind of part?
I asked bond counsel about that language,
Okay.
and they pretty much said absolutely not, because it's not really provable. And they have to issue their opinion that the bonds are validly issued and blah, 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 for us to actually sell this debt. And they said, we have to prove that was absolutely the best available interest rate. And, So they said,
I got that.
please don't do that. That's why I left it out.
And so then the last question will be at the bottom, it will say yes or no, or for the question, or?
Yeah, it says whatever the clerks add as feasible. I think it's for
The question or yes?
or against.
Yes, Rob?
Just to give me a little education on bond ballot questions like this. This, hypothetically, this passes, and let's say because of the structure, the construction of the parking lot and various things, how long is this bonding question good for? Because the only time frame is the 25 years from the issuance. But do we kind of hold this in the bank until, I mean, how long is a bond question good for?
Bond counsel generally gives us 10 years life on a question.
So hypothetically, and I'm not sure that this is
after
the case,
10
but
years,
we could start building this 10 years from now
We
and
could.
still use this bond question as
Yeah.
as an affirmative vote of the taxpayers to issue 10 years from now, and we'd have a 25-year period of time
From them.
from then.
Right.
Now, the other question, which you can hold till later if the chair desires, is the same question regarding the second one, because that's actually an issuance of collecting a tax starting 2013. Let's say construction doesn't start till 2014. Do we not collect the tax in 2013 because we don't have additional expenses in 2013?
That's optional.
That's optional. So we could actually
Yeah.
say, well, we've got the authority, but because we haven't built it yet, we're not
Right.
going to collect
We
it
don't
yet.
need
Thank you.
Well, the other limitation on the land debt is the interest rate, so in 10 years, this might not conform to what's available. So. Right. Any further questions? Jack?
Yeah, brief sidebar here, and I understand what's being asked today. But, Kathy, a question I've been asked and couldn't answer, why are we not mitigating for housing on the library?
We appeared before the housing board and basically just said that we were not going to add any more employees for this expansion because part of the new area is the new children's library where we've already had a staff member always in position there, and then the new meeting room wouldn't require staffing. So we are convinced that we're going to be fine with the level of staff that we have historically had at the library. But we only said to the housing board, that we're not going to add any staff. And then they volunteered that we could just wait and see, and they would audit us once right now to see how many employees we have, and then again in 3 years. And if we have added employees, even though we said we didn't plan to, then we would need to pay that housing fee at that point in time, and we said that sounded fair to us. And then that carried through to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the city, and again with the City Council.
Yeah, great, thank you for that explanation.
Kathy, the only note of caution I would add is that those employees have to be attributable to the addition, not to the library itself. Because the library, at this current point, can hire as many people as we want without mitigating housing, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so having a blank check for any employees that you have in the future is different from any employees attributable to your addition.
Well, I think, I think they're going to do a spot check at 3 years, and what it was sort of bandied about during some of the city council meetings about, well, what happens if the reason that you need to hire more staff is because of the success of the project. Because the hope is that when you do change the layout of the building, that it really drives circulation, and that's been the case like in Basalt when they built their new library, their circulation just went through the roof. So they asked what would happen if this is so successful that you need to hire more staff just to get the books back on the shelves and things, and I think we'll have to see what happens when it comes to that. I just assume that we can absorb, a certain amount of success. And I think that we will be able to keep the library running with the staff that we have.
Okay, I'm just asking you to look at the issue closely, because there's a difference between what the new addition and its impacts to the community and the library by itself. The circulation of the library might increase without an addition, and so they're different issues.
Yes.
And I would just make it clear in writing that that's the case.
Okay. And we have, the first half of this year, our circulation was up 8% over where it was the first half of last year. So the numbers are definitely on the rise. So I'll talk to the city some more about that. Thanks.
Any further questions? Yes, Rob.
And it's back to the timeline question. I don't know if you could just give me a quick 1 or 2 minute synopsis of what our timeline is as you see it today. I understand you just got a revised budget for this. Right. I don't know where the city is with their construction, because part of the reason why this is happening now, or happening at all, is because of the construction with the city and partnering with that. So I don't know if you have an updated timeline for this.
Well, we had, years ago, our timeline for this edition was the year 2015. And that's how we had invested our capital reserve fund with the retirement board. And we did see the possibility of saving a lot of money if we were to coordinate with the city, so that they weren't waterproofing and landscaping and then have us come in and rip it all up again 2 years later. But the city just had a meeting last week with the city council to talk about putting together a team to work again on the design of the plaza, and so they've just hired their team and have invited us to come to a meeting with them in a month. So we're not exactly sure how things are percolating there with the city on how they're going to design that, because there have been concerns about trying to maintain a performance space out there. And I really don't know. I mean, it would seem to me like somebody's got to make the first move. It's sort of like a chess game, and it would seem to me that when it does look imminent that they're going to de-landscape the top of the parking garage, that it might be a good time then for us to move in and get our construction done, and then them to come in, do their waterproofing, and re-landscape. So it could be that we would go first. And I know that they're trying to also do a lot of work on the alley to make that so that you can walk down the sidewalk in Mill Street without tipping over during the winter.
If I could
Yes,
on that. As Kathy said, they just approved a design contract, and I think right now the goal of city staff is to bring the design in this winter, both to complete the process, bring a final design for approval in front of the council so that they are set for next year's construction season. Whether they're able to stay on that schedule and reach agreement on those final designs, I think, is what we kind of have to wait and see. But what's happened is I think we've gotten ahead in our process now of having more complete designs and a vetted plan, and now the city's coming along with their consultants to do the same and do that planning this winter. So we'll have to see how those design discussions go with the council. We'll have a better sense, I think, probably by the year end where they're going to be at.
Rachel?
Yeah, just to kind of add in on this, I don't know their design process and how long the back and forth is going to take to get that right. But I do know from my time on the city that the repairs to the garage have been pushed off and pushed off and pushed off in such a way that they just can't wait too much longer. The water infiltration through the roof is starting to really seriously corrode the metal infrastructure of the garage. And so whether the library goes forward or not, there's going to be total scraping of that roof and a total rebuilding of that roof in some format, because they just can't keep putting it off, as talked about, as imminent 5 years ago. And, it's unfortunate they have, because they might get in and find more serious structural damage by the water than they realize.
Any further questions? Do we want to move on to
Well, so is there consensus on the board?
that's what I'm
The new language?
So, nobody's spoken up differently. They're approving it.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to move on that resolution and that? Our question
Is there a motion to approve?
Public hearing.
Oh, it is a public hearing.
Yeah.
Imagine that. So it's the second reading. I always forget these things. It's the second reading. It is a public hearing. Are there members of the public who wish to comment on this particular item, this resolution, for indebtedness? Seeing no public members. Yes, ma'am. Yes, please identify yourself.
I'm Barbara Reed, President of the Library Board.
Yes.
Do you want me to comment from here?
As long as we can hear you, it's better if you stand up so we can hear you.
Just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. Really appreciated Gerald's comments last time around, and we heard what you had to say. We also are really concerned about costs. The library board is actually very fiscally conservative, and we've given a lot of thought to the cost and how this is a good time in terms of interest rates, which was mentioned the last meeting, the actual construction costs being down right now, and the idea that we can partner with the city and save money, I think is pretty substantial, so we're pleased about that. Also, we really appreciate the comments about how the library is used by the community. It's a huge resource for the community. Yesterday we had the Our Day Film Festival at the library. This morning we have Baby Story Hour, which really reaches out to our early literacy programming. We have collective and individual experiences at the library every single day that are really enriching to this community. And what we are trying to create with this project is an infrastructure, a substructure for the future that will work well to allow all of these wonderful experiences at the library into the future. So that's the purpose of our planning, and we really appreciate you putting it on the ballot. And we hope to move forward into the community to explain our project well in the community so that people fully understand it and can support it in the fall. So thank you all.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Carol Auville. I live at 1024 East Hopkins. I'm not sure this is the appropriate time for me to say what I came to say. I don't know how much time I have. I used to lecture to 100 students for 90 minutes. I promise.
We'd like to lecture less than 90 minutes.
I can do that.
Preferably around 3 minutes.
Okay. I have a major problem with putting this on the ballot at all at this point in time. I looked up the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we have an 8% rate of unemployment in Pitkin County at this time, and something like 113 foreclosures within the county. We had a neighbor and friend who was out of work for a good amount of time. We have neighbors and friends who are elderly, who are on fixed incomes, and ill. I read in the paper, this is only going to cost $17 a year. For somebody who has no income, I don't care whether it's $1.45 a month, which is what that kind of amortizes out to, or $5 a month, it's too much money. I was 6 years old in 1944, grew up in a tiny little town of 600 people. We had virtually no money. And when the ice cream cone went from 5 cents to 7 cents in our little town, I didn't get one. And I'm not sure that this is the right project at the right time for the citizens here to even put it on the ballot. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other? Yes, ma'am.
I'll go over here. My name is Genevieve Smith. I'm a staff member. I'm actually an adult librarian at Pitkin County Library, and I'm just here to speak in support of the teen section. And I also want to thank you for supporting this measure on the ballot this November. I think that if you don't have children in this age group, you don't realize what a role the library does play in teenagers' lives. And I just wanted to let you know that we've had 48 programs so far this year for teenagers in particular. We've had an attendance of 641, which I think is pretty substantial. Also, the circulation of the teen section is the fastest growing. And I think if you're not a parent, you don't realize how popular the young adult genre is. So it is the fastest growing collection, and it is the smallest space currently. It is really just a hallway up there. And we have a teen advisory board that has been working with the architects and sharing ideas and swapping ideas, and they've really worked closely together on making the expansion, the proposed expansion, a great space for the teens. They deserve a private place to study, a place to share ideas, a place to collaborate, and they're very excited about this proposition. So thank you again for your support.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak at this time? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Joanna Rodden. My comment does not address the budget, but it does address the expansion. May I speak at this time?
Yes.
Okay, like I said, my name is Joanna Rodden. I'm really glad to be here. I'm representing English in Action. We are a nonprofit through the Valley. We also focus on literacy, and we have a very long-standing, strong relationship with the library. Do you know what we do? Do you know how we work? We take volunteers from our community and we train them at the library facility to be tutors to our immigrant population. What we do is we match one volunteer tutor to an immigrant who is learning English. And in Pitkin County alone, we have 85 pairs working. But we have to have a library. It's our largest resource, number one for the English language, which is the focus of what we do. We do training there for our tutors, and we use the conference room down there. All of the resources are just invaluable. Everybody understands what a wonderful resource we have in the library. But we match people in the library, and people meet in the library, and they do lessons in the library. And we're noisy. We always are trying to find a corner where we will not be disturbing people, but when we're speaking, we're speaking. You know, the computers also, they have these wonderful opportunities to speak back to the interactive computer programs, but you have to use the language and you have to speak out loud, and that's why we really are looking forward to having some meeting areas that are, for the public. We have 85 people always on our waiting list. Sometimes we have 85 right now. Sometimes we have more than that on our waiting list, and we go for, from anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half to match people. And so if anybody wants to be a volunteer, we'd be glad to train you for our program. But we need the library to do so. I want you to please consider all of the wonderful programs, the things that we do for the community, and how vital this is for the community. We understand everything that's out in front of us right now, but we as English in Action people, we really appreciate everything that we have going for us at the library. The staff and everybody has been more than wonderful for us, so please consider us while you put this on your ballot.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Yes, sir.
John Wilkinson. I'm the treasurer of the Pitkin County Library. I've been on the library board since 1996, and my wife and I were part of the team that brought forth the mill levy that got the money for the parts of the expansion going on. I just want to say we've been fiscally conservative, looking forward to having this expansion. This was in our plans for a long time to be able to have the library expand to the programs we need. I've raised 2 children in Pitkin County, Snowmass Village, and Aspen. This is the first place my kids went when they were born. We had them in early story hour. They had the music. I mean, it's just a fantastic facility we have for our community, and it reaches over the whole county. It's a countywide facility. being able to have these programs in a secure area, being able to have the children's reading area in a place where they can have the programs away from the rest of the library. We haven't done this just out of just needing to expand. We have the demand out there that needs to go into the next century. We hope this building's going to be around for a long, long time. I appreciate your concern about the unemployment in the county. This is one of the places where you can go and access the internet for free. It is available for anyone at any time. A lot of jobs anymore require online applications. So to do it, having the resources of the library is very important during this time. Now is the great time to do it. Rachel, you made the comments. I mean, the economy is what it is. We got a great opportunity here to build in a time where it's financially feasible and affordable for us to be able to do this. So appreciate all your concerns. Just want to say that being able to do this in coordination with the city is important. We've been working with them for 4 years. And I want to be able to work with them, enliven that plaza over there, and save the taxpayers nearly $1 million if we work in coordination with the city on the plaza. So I think from a fiscal responsibility point of view and for our community, we need to go forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other members of the public who wish to speak at this time? Yes, sir.
Just quickly, I'm John Keller. I was on the library board from 1985 to 1996, and that built the existing library, was also a part of the expansion, and then, or the mezzanine repairs, and then have been working with the library on the expansion. But I think from what John has said, the free parts of the library are really important, and I think that that's a countering any tax increase that none of us like the tax increases. There's no doubt about that. But I remember asking my father some 50 years ago whether I should vote on a tax increase in our hometown of Albuquerque. He said, do you want to progress or do you want to stay stagnant? And so we voted for the tax increase. And I think that that's a simple thing here is, do we want to progress or do we want to stay stagnant? I think we need to keep moving forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who wish to comment at this time? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much for speaking. Appreciate it. And we'll move on to the commissioners. Is there a motion to approve the first resolution?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment first. What we've heard today and what we've heard in the past with these meetings is a library is more than just a library these days. When I grew up in a small town, you went to a library, basically you took out a book, and that was the extent of it. And but now what we've heard is the extent that the community actually utilizes what is a tremendous asset for any community now. And having seen the tremendous shift in use from the old Basalt Library to now their new library, where at least last year their circulation had actually surpassed Pickens County's library, which is an astonishing number because of the great programs they instituted with their children's program, their teen program, having the ability to utilize that space as a community meeting area. In the summer months, the MAA has concerts down there for the community. So a library is no longer just a library where you just take out books. It addresses so many more aspects of the community. And I think I understand the concerns in terms of the taxes and the burden that may pose on some people, but that's why we let the voters decide. And the voters wish to pursue this, and they can. If they don't, then they have the ability not to. But I think our role here is to allow that to go forward, to let the voters decide what they would like to see in this community. So I support this, and I'd be happy to make a motion to move this forward. So I would make a motion to approve the alternative version as shown in our packet for submitting to the electorate a question authorizing the issuance of a general obligation debt in the amount of up to $5.4 million, which shall bear interest at a maximum net effective interest rate not to exceed 6%, be subject to redemption prior to maturity with or without a premium, and mature not later than 25 years from the issuance thereof.
Second.
Any further discussion? Yes, Rob?
Yeah, I agree with George's comments full-heartedly that, this is going to be the voters' decision in terms of a tax. I will say things that over a period of time, when we talk about, 3 cups of coffee, and then next year we talk about another 3 cups of coffee, and the year after that we talk about another 3 cups of coffee, there is a diminishing return of the tolerance of the public for taxes. And that's going to be one issue that the voters will weigh on. And I'm in support of putting this on the ballot and putting it to the voters, but I think it's important that we understand that as we have additional tax increases, and when we as a board, or I'll speak for myself personally, make a decision to look at things like this, we weigh a lot more than a cup of coffee. We weigh, is there something that's going to be a need 2 years from now that we're not going to be able to pass? As Michael has said, we cut a child in half with cutting funding to our child care programs, or because we weigh one thing against another, and those are all tax dollars, and the way our tax system is set up, we can't commingle those things. We can't say, well, the library was a good idea, but let's take some money from that and put it towards children, one of our child care programs, or one of our, programs for various other things in the county. We can't do that. So there does become a tolerance where we can't tax anymore. I'm not saying that we've reached that yet, but at 51, before we put data on this, approval rating in our poll, and then 59 after, this is kind of on the fence. Our voters may be reaching a tolerance level of where they're being taxed. The cups of coffee have been added up to too high a level. I would also say that there are some other issues that I think the voters are really going to want information about before they vote on this, which is the design of the building. I think the number one criticism that I get is how this interacts with the plaza and the design. And I hope that we have a clear definition that we can give the public so that they can weigh in on that through this ballot question. I would ask the library to do that and not just have this be a straight ballot lending question. Have it be a ballot question that says this is what we're planning on building, because I think that's the way that they're able to weigh in on that as well. Like I said previously, I am in favor of putting this on the ballot. I'm kind of on the fence of whether or not I'm going to support it or not. But I do think it's the voters' decision to decide whether or not this is a tax that they want to pay.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, Jack?
Yeah, a few comments. I'm certainly not going to change my position where I have indicated multiple times publicly and individually with people that I don't support putting ballot questions on the ballot in these tough economic times. And that really goes back to 2008 and the latter part of 2007. In my reading, trying to understand as a layman about finances and where this country is at, I saw the subprime thing happening big time. I have family in Florida, and that was a real eye-opener. I think times are really tough for people, and in good times, I support putting these kind of ballot questions on with adjustments in design, which I won't even bother about. In tough times, I don't, and I think Rob has hit on something that's important, though articulated different. I put it as the cumulative effect of tax increases ongoing forever. The example of when we had the Aspen Education Foundation in here, and we looked at their history, every 2.1 years, we had a question from the school system on the ballot. That's in the Aspen school system, not RE1. I have no history on that. I think we just need to be sensitive, and I think actually government gets a huge feather in its cap when it says times are tough. Well, we won't ask questions, but times are good. Let's all get behind this. I understand the economics, but economics of a project now compared to 5 years from now, it won't really play that we think the times are good now, but it really works on how it's coordinated with the city. I can't see us doing this without the city, meaning taking the lead. So, hey, I value the library. I know there's an evolution here of use. I've been here 40 years, and I've been in that library a bunch. We all are. Timing's just not working for me. Thank you.
Yes, Rachel.
Thank you, Michael. It's interesting to always hear the different points of view and perspective that everyone brings to a question like this. And, they're all legitimate. We all have our own filters. We all have our own sieve of information. I can really only present what stands out for me and why I'm supporting this question. We had a brief meeting with the school district yesterday, and while we didn't ask their input on this question, they were quite proud to be the 57th ranked school district in the nation and the first ranked school district in the state of Colorado. That's to their credit, and I certainly don't mean to examine or take away from their credit of their work, which is incredibly significant. But I think that the resources that the community provides through things like the library have contributed to that. And the preparedness of the students, early childhood education, when the kids from the Yellow Brick come over and are able to take those classes, or it's story hour for parents whose kids aren't even in preschool, that all contributes to a successful outcome for our kids. And I think that that's incredibly important. When I look at how many cups of coffee or the cost of the various tax measures, I look at them as investments in our community. And I've seen literally no investment made that hasn't increased our property values, hasn't increased our desirability as a community to live in, and hasn't dramatically increased our quality of life. It's not by chance that it is such a desirable place to move to live, to own property, and to enjoy a life here. You can take comparisons of communities that have not invested in themselves and ones that have. And I think Mr. Kelleher used the expression stagnate, but that tends to be what happens. And I think that our history as a country shows some of our greatest investments in ourselves have been at some of the worst times, whether it was the Great Depression or post-World War II, when we were still fighting off a considerable debt from that and trying to welcome tremendously more people back into the workforce than had ever been before, because women had entered the workforce during World War II. I like the quote that fortune favors the prepared, and I think preparing for the future is very important here. And investing in ourselves is the way to do that. And I think others have heard me use the Frank Zappa quote, which is maybe a little more well-known, but you only get out of it what you put into it. And it's by making investments in ourselves and putting into our community that we have created such a high quality of life here, a desirability for our guests as well as others. And I certainly have spoken of the guests I know who always make a point of stopping at the Pickens County Library to see what's happening. So happy to support the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. It sounds like a quote from my mom, not Frank Zappa. I was just looking up libraries during the Great Depression in the United States, and there was a large expansion of libraries in the Great Depression, I think because people wanted to add value to their communities at a time when people couldn't afford ice cream cones. And so there's a quote in this article that I was reading that libraries will get you through times with no money better than money will get you through times with no libraries. So that's certainly the way I feel, and I think I'm proud to support this, and I will ask for a vote. on the issue now. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to the authorization of expenditures. Any questions for Tom or Kathy?
Actually, this second question, or second resolution, approves a ballot question that asks for a property tax increase to support the operation of the expanded library, and the amount of that increase is $141,000 in the first year, and increasing with inflation only after that. The combined cost, as was mentioned, of both of these questions, the debt question and the property tax increase question, is dependent on what we issued the debt for, interest rate wise, but appears likely to be less than $17 per $1 million of a residential value for a home. So on, affordable housing here typically has valuations of in the 100,000 or less even, so that would be less than $2 for affordable housing. And of course we have multi-million-dollar homes on the other extreme, which would be multiples of that $17. So maybe up to $100 for some homes. And specifically with respect to the senior population, I always need to mention when we're talking about property tax increases that there are 3 programs available to help seniors with property tax in our county and state. The first of which is a county-run program through our senior services, which for low-income seniors will subsidize a portion of their property tax, actually pay them to back a portion of the property tax that they're paying on their property. The second program, which is returning this year, is the senior tax exemption. That's a statewide program, and when funds are available at the state level, that program exempts the first $100,000 of market value for senior-owned property. So on $1 million property, basically that's a 10% tax reduction for those seniors. And then the third program, which isn't taken advantage of as much as it probably should be or could be, is there's a statewide senior tax deferral program that the state runs. And what that is the state will step in and pay the full property tax for any senior, not just low income. And that's treated as a very low interest loan that isn't due until the property is sold. So it's kind of a reverse mortgage, but it's pretty automatic, and it's at very favorable interest rates, typically less than half of what a mortgage rate would be. So right now I think it's 1 to 2%, something like that. So anyway, there's help for seniors on fixed income with property tax available.
Thank you, Tom. That's enlightening. Any questions? Yes, Rob.
Yeah, and it's kind of back to what I referred to before with the timeline. This is to be levied in the 2013 tax year. And I'm just curious, and we don't have counsel in the room, but maybe you could answer the question, Tom, in terms of if this isn't built to 2015, what's the protocol for making sure that this tax is not collected? Does it come to us during budget process in terms of saying, are we going to collect this year or not? Is it part of the mill levy process? How does it interact with Tabor regarding that and those things?
Yes, this is part of the county commissioners setting the county's mill levies. And the library's mill levy is, although it's a separate district, it does run through you for approval, actually. So it's up to this board when those levies are implemented. Once we've issued the debt, however, whether this board wants to or not, basically the question authorizes a levy of whatever's necessary to repay that debt. But that levy is not instituted, cannot be instituted until the debt is issued and the repayment terms have been established.
This mill levy cannot be levied until...
The debt mill levy cannot be imposed. The first question...
Oh, until the debt is issued.
Until the debt is issued.
Well, that's already passed, so we don't have to worry about that one anymore.
This one is up to this board as to when you will levy it.
So I guess my question for Kathy is it the understanding of yourself and the library board that we will not collect this until the year of the grand opening of the new library? What is the triggering event that will have us want to collect this? Because this is, my understanding is that this is money to pay for the additional cost of the additional building, not the initial structure. That was the previous question. So when does the additional cost start? Is that the grand opening? Is that when the shovel gets dug?
I think that the library board had not discussed that yet, but I think I can probably speak for them that they would be willing to commit to not ask for this to be collected until the year of the grand opening. And I would also just take this opportunity to point out that the library board back in 2008, when things were beginning to be the recession was really taking hold, the Board of County Commissioners asked all of the entities to voluntarily reduce their taxes, and the library board did do that. So we do have a history of trying to be as conservative and help the taxpayers as we can.
Thank you. Yes, Rachel?
Yeah, I just want to add clarification to that, I hope. But, I want to make sure we, aren't construing a comment the wrong way or anything, because, when you set the mill levy for the collection, you have to, you can't wait until 3 weeks before the grand opening and then set the mill levy. It all has to be done in December for the following year, and then, the revenues don't come in. So there's a bit of a lag time and things like that. And so I just don't want there to be any misunderstanding later where people say, well, we thought you weren't doing it till 2015 because you're only opening December 31st. Whatever that timing needs to be. But I think what your clear message is that you're not going to ask for it until it's anticipated that it will be needed within the coming calendar year, and that operations will begin. Okay.
Likewise, in the first year, you could ask for a portion of the increase, not the full amount.
Yes. Thank you.
Is that clear, Rob?
Yes, that's very clear. Thank you. I think that's a good commitment. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Is there a motion?
Public hearing.
Oh, right, again. This is a public hearing. This is the second reading for this resolution. Are there members of the public who wish to speak on this particular item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and we'll go back to the commissioners. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, George.
Motion to approve submitting to the electric a question regarding a property tax increase for the Pickens County Library.
Second.
Yes, George?
I'll just make another
Is
comment.
that specific enough? Tom?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom, for the information in terms of the ability for seniors to either take advantage or defer some of their property taxes, because that's always an issue with seniors and those on fixed incomes. But the other thing is, we're pretty fortunate, very fortunate here as a community where there's about 50% of property owners in Pickens County that are out-of-town owners, second home owners or third home owners. And I don't know how many within a library district, but I'm sure a substantial amount. And those property owners their assessed values are probably, I would guess, substantially more than sort of the normal citizen who lives and works here year-round. So we're able, as a community, to really not only share the burden of a property increase to cover the cost of this library, but actually, our absentee second homeowners are taking up more than their fair share in this. And we should acknowledge that. And I think, as Rachel said earlier, I'm sure that they invest in this community because they understand and appreciate all the great amenities we have that continues to add to the value of their properties. So when we look at $17 per million in terms of an assessed tax, I would say that the majority of the citizens within the Pickens County Library District will be paying much less than that. So that's something that we should be aware of.
Thank you. So George made the motion, and did you second it, Rachel? Any further discussion? Yes, Jack?
Same comments.
It's just not the right timing. That's your view, Jack. Is that right? Any other comments at this time? I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Thank you. So thank you, Kathy and Tom, and thank the library board. Your work's ahead of you.
Right?
So the next item of business is the resolution authorizing the renewable energy mitigation funding request to come forward. We allotted an hour for 3 questions on resolutions, and we've used up approximately 55 minutes on 1 question. So you have about 2.5 minutes left.
Michael, this is a public hearing. That is the second reading of the resolution approving the Renewable Energy Mitigation Program, also known as REMP, for the funding request this year. We hope that you're well informed about it, given the first reading and all the specific requests that this would be authorizing for the year. If you have any questions, we're here to answer.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
In the resolution of the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners authorizing spending fund generated through the Renewable Energy Mitigation Program.
Second.
I'm just going to make a comment. I'm not going to support this. I think that Cindy, you actually said this before, we need to zone like we mean it. And essentially, I would bring that same thought to this. We need to adjust our program to really conserve energy and to lower our carbon footprint. And this, in my view, has just been a license to allow people to make expenditures in energy that are unnecessary and greater than they should. And we need to we need to legislate a program where energy isn't wasted on any level, and there isn't a buyout for the program. And we can invest. I mean, quite frankly, I think if you invested these rent funds directly in a solar farm, you'd be much better off than what we're doing here, which is granting. It's just the counting on this is just bad. It's just bad. I'm not sure that you get any kind of accounting that balances here in the amount of energy that's consumed by these payments and the amount of energy that's saved on the other hand. But But I think we need to deal with energy like we mean it and not allow this to happen in the future. So that's why I'm not going to support it. Any other comments? All in favor?
I'll just,
Okay.
well, it is a public hearing too, but I'll just reiterate my comments from last time. I would like to set up a rotating schedule where these things come back to us with the review of how they've accomplished what they've meant to accomplish. And I think that's something, at least in my year and a half as a county commissioner, that I haven't seen a stretch come back. So I don't know if it's these coming back in a year, or should we see last year's grant approvals come back this year, or however that should be, because I do think, I agree with Michael in the sense that we need to tweak this program so that it does match and offset what it's supposed to be mitigating.
Yes, Jack.
Yeah, I very much appreciate the evolution of CORE and this program, mostly CORE here for these comments, since I've been a commissioner and the new board of trustees, and how, I mean, we've gone through several iterations, but we're at a point now where we're really delving into, and I think we have requested, and I don't mean demanded, but strongly requested that we get outcomes, etc. And I look forward for next year the board going through those things. Because without that link of really a knowledge about what the true benefits are here, there is a gap in understanding. I fully support this program. I find it necessary, and I'm not going to be of the camp that would dictate completely what people can or can't do. But when we realize that certain infrastructure improvements, whatever, quote-unquote, desires or needs, because not all driveways are a matter of choice, they're a matter of the terrain. And I'm using that example as just one. There's some horrendous driveways that I work with as a property manager. So there's benefits. Certainly, we don't want this program to be abused, and I think it can evolve to being even stronger. I would never eliminate it. I don't see that is on the horizon, but I certainly see, continuing to refine and improve and understand outcomes. And it's not only about BTUs. Thank you.
If I might comment, is that appropriate?
We'll see. I mean, no more board comments at this time, so go ahead, Mona. I appreciate it.
Well, hi. So I'm Mona Newton. I'm the director of CORE, and I appreciate the comments that the county that you all are making about the program. And as we've stated, our intent is to really reevaluate the program with the board in September, and then have a work session with you all following that, so we can go through the process of future grant selection or future program development, and then also report back to you. And so we are in the process of doing that, and I completely agree that you should get a report back on how these programs and projects are benefiting the community, because I think we feel, and there are some ancillary benefits that I won't go through now, that have done a lot to support the industry, create jobs, create economic development, not just to mention the BTUs saved in the community and the carbon offset. So anyway.
And if I could
Yes.
very quickly add to that Mona and our chief building official, Brian Paul, and I all met last week, or was that this week? Last week, to discuss how we could shore up a lot of our REMP program relative to the use of snow melt, spa uses outside of the buildings, and try to really work on refining that just internally with our own codes. So we're all on board with a lot of the comments that you've made, so thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Are there members of the public who wish to comment at this time? Seeing no members of the public, we will close the public hearing. And did we have a motion? And
I do have a motion and a second.
okay. So I will call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I'm opposed. Thank you very much, Cindy, Mona, and Jason.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next item of business is the IGA. We've run out of time, and so you have 0 seconds to make the presentation.
That's a great presentation.
You should call for a motion at its public hearing.
Maybe this time I'll remember. So, Nan, could you introduce yourself and introduce your colleagues and introduce the issue also, please?
Thank you. I'm Nan Sundin, the Health and Human Services Director for Pickett County, and I'll let these guys introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Kim Dubois, the Adult Family Services Manager for Pickett County.
Good morning, I'm Rachel Oyes, and I serve as our Assistant County Manager for Eagle County and our Health and Human Services Executive Director. Thanks for having us back again today. We are pleased to be here.
I'm Rita Woods. I'm the Assistant Executive Director for Health and Human Services in Eagle County.
Great. So we are very excited to be here for a second reading and public hearing on a proposed intergovernmental agreement between Pickett County and Eagle County, whereby Pickett County would assume responsibility for Eagle County's child welfare and adult protection cases in Basalt and Elchbell. This agreement has been years in the making. We've been talking about it or something like it for almost 4 years. And what we found is probably that this is such a sensitive service, child welfare, protecting children and families and vulnerable adults, that it actually took more work on our part to develop a level of trust that you can imagine it would take for Eagle County to actually invite us to take on these cases for them. So I want to applaud the team for an amazing piece of work around collaboration and really looking at what does shared governance look like and how do we create efficiencies with our very limited dollars to serve our most vulnerable families and children. Essentially, Eagle County will, Pickett County will be charging a fee for service. We will be hiring a social caseworker, preferably someone who's bilingual, and we will now assume that our territory actually goes from Redstone to Carbondale, from Eagle County, Elgibel, up to Aspen, and that will help us determine how to deploy our resources better, smoother, faster, to be more responsive to children and families and vulnerable adults. The plan is that we will pick up child welfare cases as soon as we get a staff person, and then within 6 months we'll pick up the adult protection referrals from Elgibel and Basalt. And I think we have spent a lot of time talking to the state to make sure that there are no barriers in terms of data entry, in terms of finances, in terms of the state's perception of how we do business here. This is fairly unique, this collaboration, and all we've gotten from the state is mostly support, all support. And so we don't see any barriers at this point to this agreement. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys and see if there's anything you want to add that I missed.
I just want to thank you and the community partners and the team that you have here within Health and Human Services, because they've been extremely patient, diligent, passionate, and committed to enhancing the services that we provide within the Roaring Fork Valley. We see this as an extended partnership in Eagle County. We have many agreements with you, and I think this just takes it to the next step. And that camaraderie, respect, collegial relationship that we do have, we think this is kind of the tipping point. We look forward to expanding other services and resources together. And really, ultimately, this builds both capacity within our counties to ultimately serve the communities and families the best that we can. So thank you for considering this, and we appreciate your diligence. Also want to thank the attorneys that have spent many hours in helping us cross the T's and dot the I's, because that is important to both of our institutions, and ultimately, we do see ourselves as one very strong, dedicated team to serve the community.
Thank you.
I think that's fabulous. We're just so pleased with the relationship that we've built. I don't know how we could have provided the services that we have without the kind of relationships that we've built. It's just been wonderful.
Can't say enough about Leon and Kim.
Oh, yes, you can.
Any questions? Yes, Jack?
Yeah, I think this is really an outstanding move. Cooperation in the past speaks for itself, and I think we'll enter into a new territory, as it were, in dealing with all this. Only question I have, I just want to reiterate that it has been totally resolved in the minds of staff, Nan and John, about the liability issue. We're very comfortable where we landed at the end of the day.
Yeah, Jack, we obviously we spent a lot of time. I think that's part of what Rachel is referring to, is crossing the T's and dotting the I's. Obviously, that's something that we'll be tracking on an annual basis, and we'll just continue to visit about. But we're very comfortable with where we are entering this agreement, and we're very comfortable with this relationship. And I think we've done our due diligence to ensure we've minimized the risk to both parties.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate all of the work.
George, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all of our staff and Eagle County staff for working so diligently on this issue and to address the really a very difficult problem in terms of child protection in an adult. It's very sensitive, and we've acknowledged that. But I also want to acknowledge and thank our colleagues at Eagle County, the Eagle County Commissioners, for their support also in bringing this forward. That we continue to develop partnerships and collaboration with Eagle County in many different areas, and I think that's a benefit for all the citizens in Roaring Fork Valley. So thank you.
Is there a motion? Yes, Jack?
I'd like to make a motion to approve a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, authorizing...
Public hearing. I apologize, Jack.
Is this something like a public hearing?
This is a public hearing. Yeah. I apologize.
For some reason, I just haven't been able to keep it
We can
together.
still make a motion and
Yeah, so
Okay.
let me just pick up kind of where I was authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Board of County Commissioners of Eagle County for the provision of child and adult protection services.
Second. Okay. So it is a public hearing. Are there members of the public who wish to speak on this IGA? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Kelly Donnelly, and I am the school counselor at BOCC Middle School, and just wanted to come and let you guys know, thank you for taking the time, and thanking Eagle County for taking the time to really look at what's in the best interest of the children and family in the BOCC Elgeville area. And I'm very excited for this collaboration and for this to happen, so the services are in line with what currently goes on. So I just wanted to take the time to thank all of you for looking at the BOCC Elgeville area.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Yes, Rachel?
Yeah, I'd just like to ditto everyone's thanks, certainly, and be brief in the sake of time, but, so long there's been that discussion of should there be a Soperus County instead of Eagle, Pickett, and Garfield, and people have pointed out many times that the, wildlife doesn't respect county boundaries. Certainly our workforce is spread throughout the region, and it's a little convoluted as it is now. And this is certainly a step towards the, we're all one valley type of approach to problem solving, to regionalization, and towards the better care of all of our citizens. So I applaud you all for your efforts as well.
Thank you. And I will say that, that all those jurisdictions that run through our valley, all these different jurisdictions, they're tough to deal with. But given the imagination of both Eagle County and Pickens County, their staff, and the entire organization, they've been able to overcome those jurisdictional boundaries, and they become less important. Those boundaries become less important than the services we can provide, and particularly the services we can provide for children. And I deeply appreciate all the work. I know it's been a struggle, and I deeply appreciate the work. Thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Michael, I'm recusing myself from the next item, which is the continuation of the Hunter Creek Trail discussion.
Well, you don't have to, Rachel. I mean, it's just an informative thing.
It has 50 minutes on the agenda. It seemed like there was more discussion going on.
Okay. You don't want to take a leave. So, is Gary Tannenbaum here?
Yes, I am.
Where are you, Gary?
I'm hiding behind this lovely protection that you have.
So, the next item.
John, do you want to stay in special meetings so you can go into executive later?
That would
Okay.
take a little
Thank you, GR. The Health and Human Services people are celebrating so loudly. We couldn't hear everything. So the item in front of us is a review of the the Red Mountain Road Hunter Creek Extension crossing. And
They're going to all have that.
I'm waiting for staff to settle down. So it's the Red Mountain Road crossing, and what we asked staff to do at our last meeting was the commissioners had suggested numerous improvements to or additions to the Red Mountain Road crossing, and we just wanted to see those additions memorialized in some documents, and staff today has those documents in front of us. Gary, do you want to review with us what you have down here?
I do. Last week, you guys gave us direction to come back with the final plan. And in that final plan, there were specific things that you guys wanted to see in this design of the crossing at Red Mountain Road. And so staff, especially the city staff and GR, have worked extremely hard over the last week to come up with this final design. And we feel it meets your direction. So, there are two elements here. There's the element of the bike dismount and making sure that bikes have to dismount on this before you get to Red Mountain Road. And then the second is the speed bumps. And we have included 3 speed bumps. What I'm going to have Austin do is first explain the bike dismount, and then we'll go into the speed bumps.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Again, I'm Austin Weiss with the City of Aspen Parks Department. And so what we did here was we came up with a design that physically forces a bicyclist to have to stop and dismount their bicycle in order to get through a gate, if you will, right at the road crossing on either side of the road crossing. So if you're traveling, say, east to west, you would first see a sign that says bicycles must dismount, and then shortly thereafter you would encounter a fence similar to what we've done up on Smuggler that creates a little S curve, if you will, that a bicycle would have to get off, walk their bike through that fence area there, and then cross the road. We have created enough area on either side of the road to facilitate multiple trail users, whether they be walkers or bicyclists. They would cross through another fence gated area on the west side, and then they could remount their bicycle and continue on their way towards the Rio Grande Trail. And so we utilized this fence because, as I said, it was successful up on Smuggler. It does create a scenario where it's impossible to ride through, and so it will force a bicyclist to dismount there. It does create a larger impact on either side of the road to create this area, this space to allow for the dismount area, which on the east side does impact more trees than the previous scenario. There could be as many as 8 to 10 trees that would be impacted by this area. And I think it meets your goal there. On the west side of the road there, it requires that we extend a fence to the bridge abutment, if you will, over Hunter Creek, because there is a utility access that Aspen Consolidated Sanitation needs to access their sewer line. And so we would have a gate there. Our concern was if we didn't extend the fence and install a gate, that a bicycler that was coming up that rise, knowing that there was a physical barrier that made them dismount, they might choose to just head out onto the road at that location and cross. So we feel like that extended fence and gate is important in this scenario. That's about it in a nutshell, and I can answer any questions about this. But
Great. Can unicyclists get through this? I'm sorry. Rob, you brought up this point in particular, I think, and does this satisfy your concern?
This does. I did have one question regarding this, and there's no stop for the car traffic. There's warnings, or it's not a yield sign, so they're not yielding to pedestrians, but they're being warned of pedestrians. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
So, and I'm not sure what the answer to this is, but how do you tell a biker or a child or a family on the sidewalk that there isn't a stop from the cars? I mean, my example is driving through Aspen, there's stops one way and no stop signs going the other way. Well, when all the tourists are in town, they think that they're all four-way stops. So they often drive out into the traffic thinking that the other traffic is going to stop. That's a concern of mine, in the sense that I'm a biker, I'm on the side of the road, I see a car coming down, they've got these not yield signs but warning signs, so they start to slow down. To me it looks like the car is going to stop, and I foolishly step out into the street and the car doesn't stop because they've got the right of way. Is there a sign, is there some sort of sign that says, cars have right of way, or do you understand my concern? And I think like Michael said, we're putting a lot of safety features in here, and I think rightfully so. We're putting a lot of safety features in here. But that's certainly a concern, that somebody's there and they think that someone's going to stop.
Well, one of the things we've done is, we did this once at the Upper Brush Creek Trail, is on the stop sign itself. You can get a stop sign with underneath says cars don't stop.
Yeah.
Because Brush Creek, the crossing at Brush Creek Trail up top, is a lot of times people thought that, if you get to there, you can just keep going and the car's going to stop you. So it said, the stop sign on it said stop, and it was a normal, regular stop sign, but underneath had letterings, cars don't.
Yeah.
Cars are not required.
Cars don't stop, or the other thing would be, pedestrians required to yield to cars, or something like that. Anyway.
Well, just on that issue, I mean, given the city's posting around town, in crosswalks, the cars have to yield to pedestrians.
Yeah.
And so I would assume, and they cite state law on that basis for those crossings. So I would assume if this is an official pedestrian crossing, that the
cars have to yield to
the cars have to yield to pedestrians. However, common sense, signs, common sense, you just can't
protect.
You can't legislate it,
yeah,
and you can't sign for it. And so what we've done here, it seems to me, is erected some physical structures that allow people to slow down. They're not going to enter onto the street precipitously, and we've done the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Well, the Rio Grande Trail at McLean Flats is a great example of how there's a stop sign on the trail, there's warning signs on the thing, and honestly, we have a ton of people. It's not yet. There always could be something that happens. There are hundreds of people a day going past that, and that is very similar to this. And we're not going to the same lengths as this. And we have seen that cars and people figure it out, and they just do.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't see a lot of people. If the car's not stopping, the people don't go.
And I trust in that as well. I do have one other question. Yes. My other question, and I drove up there back and forth 3 times today. Does anybody know what the speed limit is at that spot?
If you're coming from town, it's 15. If you're coming from Red Mountain Road above, it's 25.
It's actually 20 coming from Red Mountain Road. There's a sign that's way up the hill. It's actually above the new construction of Red Mountain Road. At the top, almost where it starts to cut back. That's the only speed limit sign coming down that says 20 miles per hour. There's a warning sign for a 20-mile-per-hour curve, but my understanding is that's not a speed limit sign. That's this is the bank advisory. But there's a speed limit sign that's beyond the 25-mile-per-hour sign going up the hill, because at the top of the hill it turns to 25 miles going up. There's a speed limit sign almost at the switchback. It's actually a little bit down from the switchback that says 20 miles per hour coming down. And then there's the 15 miles per hour going up the hill across. And I would just say that we should straighten that out for confusion. Maybe make that whole area 15 or something, or so that people know it's 15 whether you're going up or down in that section, because there's a pedestrian crossing. It's 15, and there should be a sign, a speed limit sign, on the downhill side closer to where that turn is, where you actually can start to see the pedestrians. Because if you come out of Willoughby Way, there's no speed limit sign on the downhill side. The speed limit sign is up from Willoughby Way. So somebody might just assume they're in a 25 zone there and go down. And I think part of the safety control of this crossing is not just controlling the pedestrian traffic, but it's controlling the car traffic. I actually drove 15 miles per hour up that section, starting where that sign was. I built up 3 cars behind me almost on every trip. 15 miles per hour is incredibly slow, but cars don't go 15 miles per hour there. So that signage for those speed limits, I think, is going to be crucial. And I'd like that in this plan.
Let me say, I get the drift of what you're saying, but it actually isn't up to Open Space and Trails, and it isn't up to the Parks Department. It would be up to our county engineer and their counterpart at the city, since for some reason somebody decided to put a jurisdictional line in there. So I think what the core of what you're saying is that we need to have consistent directions for the automobiles in terms of speed.
Correct.
And that meet the engineering requirements that our county engineer would have to operate under. And so he can come back to us on that basis and talk to us about what those challenges are. Is that okay, Rob?
That's okay. It's perfect.
Is that okay with the rest of the commissioners? Okay. George, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you. Rob, I think the operative word you used earlier was foolishly stepping out. Yeah. We can't.
I know.
Again, I said this last time, there's a responsibility that everyone has to take upon themselves, and we can't account for every situation. And I would say that we are well over in terms of addressing the safety issue at this intersection. When we look at, as Gary said earlier, when we look at where the Rio Grande Trail crosses coming down McLean Flats Road, and cars are going down that road, and trucks are going up that road, that is a major intersection for bicyclists and for motorists. And we don't have a lot of these different signages and alternatives and ways to discourage bikers from crossing without dismounting there. And it works because bikers have to take their responsibility. There is a stop sign there, and you stop, and you look, and then you go. And I think we've addressed that. I think city and county staff have addressed that sufficiently, in my mind, for the safety of the crossing of this trail.
Hold on, Jack, do you want to make any comments on this particular crossing? Any design So, are you in favor of it, Jack, or not?
No, I'm not in favor because there's no reason to be building it in the first place, so.
Okay. Do we have general agreement that this is the improvements that we wanted on this particular, on the crossing aspect of this? Yes? Okay. Now we'll move on to, the other item was that the speed bump at the crossing was the only speed bump proposed, and it was thought by some of the commissioners that with the addition of essentially warning speed bumps, that people's speed would be reduced by the time they got to the major crossing here. And that's what you show on this plan. Is that right, Gary?
Correct. Basically, the last time we got direction to include 2 more speed humps on either side of the crossing. And so the city has worked really closely with GR and SGM to their consulting engineer to come up with this design.
So these, what are the dimensions of these speed humps, GR? I mean, in terms of height off grade of the road.
We chose a 3-inch speed table. So the rise of the table is 3 inches off of the existing pavement. These are 22 feet long. We used a design that the City of Portland actually developed. We're double checking all of that against what all of our national standards are, but they're all within reason. And the shape of this is meant to, slow traffic down to a point where it increases the safety. We laid these out on the tangents or on the straightaways on either end of past the trail crossing, 130 feet in each direction. Some of that was dictated a little bit more of the geometry of the road than anything else. And these are the things that we went out and looked at. We had a couple issues raised regarding drainage in this area as well. The speed table that is uphill or on the right side of the drawing that you have is actually designed with a curb cut that will allow drainage of water off of the roadway at that speed table, which will reduce the amount of water that would eventually make it down to the bridge and will help those sorts of issues as well.
And GR, on the bridge, is that the uphill one you're talking about with the curb cut? And they were also concerned on the bridge that had pooling too. So did you look at that area? Certainly with the speed hump that's proposed there.
Well, with the one on the Red Mountain side of everything, if I'll point here on the with this speed table here with the drainage. It's collecting all of the water, basically from near Willoughby Way and Red Mountain, coming down where it turns to curb and gutter. So with the elimination of this water here, that's taking a lot of the water that was pooling on the bridge. There are 2 drains on the bridge here. Here we'd probably allow the water to pass and use those drains that are existing there.
So that what you're saying is that the speed hump itself won't collect water on the bridge, that there's adequate drainage before and after that speed hump, that we don't expect pooling at the base of that speed hump. Yes, George?
GR, there were several comments or letters to Yetter that I saw that talked about years ago there was a speed bump that was located somewhere along this road, and it was eventually taken out by the county because it seemed to actually be causing problems. And I don't know the history of that, do you?
I'm unsure of the history of any of the former traffic calming devices on Red Mountain.
I think staff, city staff, do anybody know?
My understanding is actually it was on the city side, a little bit farther down or to the south, if you will, down in there, and it was removed. I want to say it was probably 14 years ago or so. It's been quite a while ago. But you are correct, as far as I know, that there was another one that was down there that was removed because I think at the time it was located too much on the curb, and that's what was creating the problems.
Thanks.
Yes, Jack.
I remember when we were in Rio Grande, we had a discussion kind of that moved this forward. And I'm sensing an inconsistency from one of my questions. I've been concerned about the safety of this from word go, as everyone is. And I've been, at that time I had asked about speed bumps, additional speed bumps. I thought GR said they would add danger to the road because, and I'm talking, referring here to winter, where you have some icing, according to what's happening with precipitation, not melt down the road, but literally precipitation. People approach a speed bump, hit their brakes, and accidents caused. And I believe that links up to the numerous, we've had comments all over the place, pro, con. This is typical of our community. So, but many of those comments that George just alluded to was about the older speed bump that caused accidents. So to me, there's a little bit of inconsistency here as to what history says, and I can't quote, but in effect, GR said that would present a safety issue to where we're at now. So how do I...
So should we ask GR what you're asking, Jack, do these speed humps present a safety issue in terms of a hazard to motorists?
I think with adding 2 speed tables to either side of the trail crossing, there's... Actually, I don't know how to answer that question right now, Jack. The context, in the context of what we were talking about back in the Rio Grande, I don't remember. As far as if this design will add some sort of safety hazard to the roadway, I guess it depends on the type of context you think of it. Are we going to?
Well, GR, let me say, if people are proceeding at 15 miles an hour uphill and they're coming down at 20 miles an hour downhill, which according to Rob is the speed limit at that area, would these present a hazard?
They should.
Okay. So let's go from there then. Any more questions? Yes, Jack.
Yeah, well, okay, you offered a hypothetical people following the speed limit. The reason why this is unsafe and everyone perceives this as being unsafe is because there is a considerable amount of people not following the speed limit. So,
I'm not sure what you can do about that, Jack, quite frankly. I think, one of the issues that Dale talked about, which is one of the growing aspects of traffic control is not signage. That's proven to be ineffective, quite frankly, but is putting bends in the road, natural geography that slows down people just instinctively to slow down. And that's proven very effective in many areas just by putting turns, bends, and in this case, humps in the road. And that people build up a memory of what those hazards are and instinctively slow down. When you come off of Red Mountain, maybe we made a mistake improving that road off of Red Mountain because we made it essentially painless to come down Red Mountain. Good transitions, a wide road, none of which the road had previously. And it's, that, maybe we made a mistake. That allows people to go faster than they should. But it's, as George alluded to, there's a responsibility on the part of motorists and everyone else to do things safely, whether it's at 15 miles an hour or 17 miles an hour. I don't really care as long as it's safe. And I think these humps, given that they're a 3-inch change in grade, are just simply, they're not hazardous in and of themselves. They just simply remind people, and I think people in Red Mountain are adaptable, and they will adapt to these speed humps. And we'll protect the people who wish to use the path. It seems to me a perfectly good compromise. George?
It seems like the positioning of these speed humps should address that problem, because you've got good line of sight, and it's not on any of the steep sections or around the curves. Similar to the speed humps on Cemetery Lane, where there's a series of them, if one were traveling beyond the speed limit there in the winter on snowy roads, it could be a safety hazard. But people in that neighborhood have adjusted to those speed humps. They're accustomed to it, and they follow those, and those speed humps actually do the job that they were designed to, and that was to slow and control traffic. And the comments we heard again and again from the residents of Red Mountain was the concern of people going over the speed limits up and down this road. And this should actually address that issue, not only for the Hunter Creek crossing, but to address the issue of speeders going up and down that road for the residents of Red Mountain. So they should actually be grateful for this, I would think. It's a problem that needs to be addressed, and this is a solution.
Any other comments? So is it the direction of the board that this is a sufficient plan, and this plan that we've been presented here matches what our requests?
That's for me.
It is for me.
And Jack, you're not in. Yes, Jack.
Yeah, I'll make my comments. As this has evolved, I know we've worked hard in attempting to deal with one of the two issues for me, which is safety. And I'm not convinced that it'll work, but obviously this will be moved forward. The second issue for me is what I consider total unnecessary invasion of the natural environment, which is only a third of a mile here, now understand, but still, I find it unnecessary for man's footprint to kind of be stamped all over the place when literally we have an aspen block's worth of walking, probably, and you wait for vehicles crossing the existing crossing over there by Hunter Longhouse. Probably 4 minutes, a few signs, and we could link trails, not invade this. But the final straw for me, and now I am adamantly opposed to this, is not only going to lose some trees, but now we're going to lose more trees. And these are older trees. I haven't heard they're unhealthy or any of that. I just see this trail as being unnecessary, and so I'm certainly not going to support it for two reasons. The natural environment being invaded in unnecessarily, as well as the safety. And I will say that we've worked hard to try to make this safe as possible. So I'm not saying it's unsafe. I'm saying it only takes one accident to have a problem here.
Thank you, Jack. So the direction of the board is to proceed with this plan that you've presented, and I want to thank you guys for responding so quickly to this, both the Aspen Parks and Trails and our own open space and our county engineer. This was difficult to do in the short time that we asked for you to be done, and we appreciate the work that you've done. Thank you. board, somehow we've gotten ahead of schedule. I'm not sure how that happened, since we were behind schedule. Yes, GR.
Michael, if you'd like your weekly update, I'd be more than happy to save myself a trip into town this afternoon.
Well, what does the board think? Do we want to make
If we could save GR's time, which I know is very valuable, I would like to save GR's time.
GR, why don't you give us a weekly update on, since you're here, why don't you give us a weekly update on our road projects?
Thank you for your time, Board. So we've finished the paving portion of Castle Creek. That's the major news. We finished yesterday afternoon. We were really shooting for last week, but it didn't quite happen. We had a few run-ins with Mother Nature. But we're done up there with the paving portion. We're going to build up the shoulders. I'm going to have a scheduling meeting with the contractor this week to determine that. Final striping, and Castle Creek is done. We do still have Smith Hill, Jack Reddick, the road up to the landfill, and Wilby Way, and we're putting pencil to paper to try to figure out all those schedules and how to best complete those, and whether it's if they're going to need to bring in a second crew to do things like Wilby. So some of those jobs, the scope is a little bit different. We're putting down the same amount of asphalt, but with the types of roads that we're doing, the equipment that they're going to be using is a little bit different already. So it could be advantageous for them to have two crews working at the same time.
George.
Just as long as you're here, I'll make and for the public, because Castle Creek, as we just talked about safety issues and personal responsibilities, having a brand new surface on Castle Creek Road, which is one of the most popular bicycling routes in the county, is going to encourage people to see how fast they can go up or down that road. And I would encourage the bicyclists that they are sharing the road with motorists, and to take personal responsibility in that. And those who feel that they need to ride double or triple abreast, that's really not sharing the road with the motorists. And so when motorists are coming upon you, I would suggest that if you're riding with a group of folks, that you get into a single file for that stretch, and again, share that road and not try to see how fast, who can have the fastest time going down or up Castle Creek Road, because it will be a great new amenity for bicyclists as well as for motorists.
Thank you, George. Yeah, I've got to say, I've traveled on Castle Creek Road in a car, and just in a car, it's like velvet up there. It raises the question of why aren't all our roads like that? So I guess that's our goal, right? That should be our goal. They did a tremendous job there, and be sure to thank all the Elam people. It was neat, it was efficient, and it was as good as you can get, I think. It was wonderful.
We've been considering submitting the job for some of the awards statewide. So
yeah, I mean, it was awesome. Yes, Jack.
Yeah, a question about paving in general. I noticed at the airport they are doing the perimeter road. Were they able to piggyback onto the contract?
We are contracted with Elam to do that work. And
at the same rate, yeah, piggyback?
There's a little bit different because they're doing the ramp spec too also, Jack, and so there's a different paving spec that they've been using for the majority of the project.
It's a federal spec.
It's a weight limit? Yeah, okay.
Well, I think it's drainage primarily.
They also use a different oil.
Yeah.
Sometimes use a modified binder. So.
And deviation from a norm too. It's tight. Thank you, GR.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Board, should we take off early, or is there a 15-minute subject that we can cover at this point?
Well, we probably need to have Commissioner Richards back. We do have an executive session scheduled for later on today, and I do have some written material I could give you as 15 minutes of homework prior to you going to lunch.
No, I think break.
well distributed, and you can decide what you do with it.
We can read it at a lunch break, can't we?
Yes, we can.
I don't want to read here under.
Oh, of course, yeah. No, it wasn't.
No, he's saying travel with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
George?
I mean, if we can get, if Rachel's still in, nearby, we can maybe knock off future agendas or something.
Yeah. I doubt she may have gone upstairs, but if we had lunch after, my guess is
And they're going to go pretty quick anyway, so I'd say let's adjourn, get a little reading material if we care to peruse it.
For once, I agree with Jack.
That's really unusual. We better raise the flag on this one.
So, thank you, Caitlin. We'll be back at 1 o'clock. Back, it's 1 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, August 21st, 2012. We're at our work session, and we have, as the next task in front of us, memorandums of interest, MOIs. And John, what is our first MOI?
Our first MOI is a semi-annual report from the manager's office. We have address some highlights for the board in areas or sections that are directly reporting to the county manager's office. What we've been doing is having these semi-annual updates for all of our sections so that the board can see the types of activities that have been going on in the organization over the course of the year. Make sure that you have a memo update and address any questions that you might have.
So do you want just questions, John, or are you going to go through it?
Well, I'm sure either Phyllis or myself could go through and highlight some things. If you would prefer, we've done it both ways. And sometimes you all just wanted to ask questions or say, looks good. Sometimes you wanted us to go through and do a summary. So at the board's pleasure.
Board, what would you like to do? Do you want to just ask questions?
How about just a couple of highlights for the public?
You want to hit some highlights?
Okay. Some highlights. And Tom's here. Do you want to add any highlights for yours right away, or you want me to just go for it?
Go for it.
Okay. I'd say most of the projects that are going on in facilities are a huge highlight for us, to be able to have so many different improvements going on at so many different stages and things that are yet to come. The work that's being done on our boiler plant, creating one boiler plant that's going to service both the courthouse and the jail as one facility, one boiler plant. There are 3 boilers that go in there for redundancy. So don't have real great pictures, with the concrete slab we included for you in your update, just to where it is, some of the things that had to be moved, but it was much less expensive to have one boiler plant, particularly for the courthouse. I don't know if you remember a couple of weeks ago, they were trenching behind and putting some really good pipes in, and that's what that was a part of. So that's been a great project that's going on. The ambulance district quarters up at the hospital, they're going to have those life safety improvements, and that's going on. And you had approved that budget supplemental a while back. Things that we have going on in HR. The Aspen Valley Healthcare Alliance, working with the other self-insured employers in the region to see what we can do to influence how healthcare is provided, to provide for outcomes, which right now it's our health care system for at least physicians is based on volume. The more patients, the more services, they get paid accordingly. So we're looking at how that's being done in other parts of the country. This part of the state has been awarded a grant through, okay, John, you're going to have to help me with names for this.
Yeah, it's the Beacon project, which we've talked about a few times before, and there are, I believe, 18 communities nationally that have been selected as Beacon sites, and what will happen there is we're getting support to cross-reference our claims data with electronic medical records and to start to build a profile of what is driving costs, medical costs in our community, and more importantly, what types of activities seem to be best at helping to manage those costs or be preventive types of activities, so we can start to adjust our plan designs and such to support the things that work and not pay for the things that don't.
And then just one other piece is the training initiative that we've been trying to get off the ground for a couple of years. The HR staff has put together 3 different tracks, which we're really pleased with. One for supervisors and managers that are geared, which is why Danette's not here. We have Kathy Greer, an attorney out of Denver, who's done some work with us doing training for supervisors on staying out of litigation and just why it's important to be an effective supervisor. That's a very broad way to say it, but that's a good focus for it.
and then developing skills for all employees, and then a personal enrichment program, which includes some of the retirement readiness programs. Finding Your Passion was one of the ones that was offered under that track. That's really about just personal growth. So we're really happy to have those going, and hopefully those will develop more as the years go on. It's a program that we're trying to be able to schedule a long time out. These programs are scheduled till the rest of the year so people can accommodate planning better for the future of when training is coming up. So there's some highlights.
Any questions? Yes, Jack.
Yeah, on page 2, where you talk about Compass, we're all obviously into efficiency as more than a buzzword. So the question I have is productivity cost savings on the little chart we have. Is there a formula or something that arrives at that number?
I believe they're using an average hourly wage, so the time that it takes them to do either researching doctors or specialists for employees, following up on billing, work that would otherwise be done by an employee. That's the productivity. That's how that savings is calculated.
An employee while on the books?
Sometimes, yes.
Partly because only, and they're estimates, Jack, but typically, if you're trying to deal with a provider, like a doctor's office or billing or such, those aren't activities that are typically available outside of work hours. And so what we found is that by providing this service where we have somebody who knows, can take the information and go and sort out billing issues or sort out finding providers. For example, I just used them to find an eye doctor, and it took me 5 minutes of my time, tops. Whereas if I had to go through and figure that out and make the calls and set the appointments and such, it'd take a lot longer. And so they're just taking an average of, hey, if we're offloading that from our employees, that's a productivity savings potentially during the day. So it's not a hard number, it's not a direct number, but we wanted to try and capture that this is a service that we think keeps employees focused on doing their job.
And I think they use not a very high hourly wage for that average, because it also impacts people if you have a bill that you don't think's right. Even if you're solving it when you're not at work time, you may be impacted during your work time on just the stress that you have on dealing with either doctor's appointments or finding a specialist or something you have going on. So that's how they come up. They just use a round piece.
Yeah, page 3, I'm kind of a dummy here, I guess. Facilities management, looks like some training courses, ICS, what does that mean?
Incident command system. So this is we're trying to get our entire workforce trained, obviously, on incident command protocols, and if there should ever be an event, for example, wildfire really, heightened our awareness of our preparedness on that level. And so we have been making a concerted effort, which both is a federal requirement, so we have to be making progress towards this as part of our acceptance of most federal grants, actually. But it's also the right thing to do as an organization. I believe we're at about 90% compliance across the organization now, which is good.
With 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's great, and I know it's not the airport, but it's still another acronym, and I just didn't realize this one. Down on page 4, risk management, property claims. We have $1 reserve left. What, and I'm not asking for a list of, but what is an example of a property claim, for example?
Snowplow in your mailbox.
Is that from personal experience?
Also, when with the plumbing, a pipe burst in Public Works, and we needed to repair it, we ended up with damage to the sheetrock, and they had to take everything down. That was also a claim. The $1 reserve, that's technically what's there. They probably didn't want to leave it at 0, So that's going to be an insurance practice, not a practical dollar.
Right. Okay.
So you can see all, I mean, I don't know the average. Maybe what would be helpful is the range of the claims. So you can get an idea of how, you know, you look at that and there's 17 claims, an average of 1,000 per claim, but maybe there's one for 10,000 and 16 for the other 7, and I don't know that. So maybe we'll include that to give you a little idea, better idea of what kind of claims we have.
Well, the pleasure of the board. It's obviously organization oriented, but I was wondering, well, you know, like when we had the sewer here, and that created other problems, maybe that's covered because we're doing a project also.
That was already a project where we were working on infiltration, and when we dug in, we obviously found more than we expected to, but we're able to complete that repair under that project budget.
Great, almost done here. Page 8, translator fund. Looks like we have transform an electrical service line to replace to Elephant Mountain. Did the ballot language actually allow us to use money to pay for maintenance? I mean, I know operation, I don't know if there's much of a difference of operations and maintenance.
Yeah, no, it is to develop and maintain and operate the sites, and so without that cable, we obviously couldn't operate that translator site.
Yeah, no, hey, I'm not questioning that. I was just making sure. Changes to the FM station lineup, I assume. Says no changes made until protest period and process is complete. Well, when that is complete, will those changes come to the board so we see what's going on? You know, everyone has their favorite stations.
Mm-hmm. Part of the survey was the Grand Junction stations, that people wanted more local stations in the priority. So before any Grand Junction station would be taken off, one, they'd be noticed. Any station that's put on, there were approximately 6 or 7 stations that applied for the spaces that may become available when that change is made. So obviously with 2 spaces and 6 or 7 asking for, there may be some appeals, so we'll let you know where that ends up and what the station lineups will be.
So is this an area where the translator board makes the decisions and we don't weigh in unless there's an appeal?
Correct.
That was just adopted.
Right, that policy was just adopted earlier, at the end of last year? And you did adopt that policy. That came through the board.
Okay, and then I think this is part of the greater report, Tom's investment report. I'd like to get a handle whenever, you know, as part of this conversation of, says staff will proceed to implement the investment strategy described above. I'd like to know what that means.
Actually, your next MOI is going to answer that.
Yeah, so that's not part of the
question.
Right.
admin, it's separate. Okay, we'll wait.
Any further questions from staff? Yes, Rob.
That covered a handful of mine, but I think I asked something regarding this on page 4 under the manager's office. This seminar that was well attended with excellent questions and great discussion regarding how to submit and present items to the board. I'm just really curious what the great questions and great discussion was and how you tell people to present to us.
Well, you should have come to the training, Rob.
I should have come to the training.
It was open to everyone.
Obviously, there's some logisticals about having your ducks in a row before presenting to the board, but I'm sure there's more to it than that, and I think the feedback would be good for us to know how they're presenting to us, much like understanding the other person's personality traits when you're receiving the information, to understand how they're presenting it to you.
You know what? Most of it did focus on the logistics. It is quite a process actually to collect and get into the proper form the information that gets put together for you guys on a weekly or every other week basis. So we did focus a lot on that process and how that can be streamlined. In terms of the discussion that I had with staff was also getting us to step back and think a little bit about the different worlds that we live in from time to time, because staff tends to be in the details, in the facts on a day-to-day basis. And when staff is coming to present to a policy, a legislative body like yourselves, it's important for us to know that, but we need to step back and provide a little more context, a little bit more of the story. Why are we here? Not just for us, but not just for you as a board, but reminding staff that this is the first time the folks who are joining us by grassroots and such are oftentimes hearing this. And the board's been really good about, I think, pulling staff back when we dive into the details too quickly to remind us why are we here and what are we talking about, and then to go in to the potential solutions. And also talk a little bit about what level of detail to present versus what, to see where your questions and where your thoughts are, because you all have already done some homework on these different items. So we can keep items moving in a timely fashion, but also in a fashion that's informative for the public and for you as policymakers. And that is it's always a challenge to achieve that balance. So we talked about what that balance might look like, and folks had specific questions. We had some folks who offered their stories of when they thought maybe they gave way too much detail or dove into the middle, times where they gave way too little detail, and how, talking about how the board responded and talked about strategies for how can we improve on our presentation for the public and you. And that's not getting into probably a level of detail that they may be interested in, but that was where my section of it really focused. The previous section was really about the mechanics, which are, with 200 employees, over half of which may be in front of you at one time or another, that paying attention to the mechanics of whens and hows and such is important. What else? Did we miss anything there?
I think there's a lot of the mechanics, and when do you make things work sessions? How do you deal, particularly people who don't do a lot of resolutions or do presentations at regular meetings? What's the difference? How does it work? When do you need a resolution? Why isn't there an ordinance? So it was some definitions, and there were some good stories there around those pieces too.
Yeah. And board members are always welcome, if you wanted to attend that kind of discussion and be part of it. That would be welcome.
So, Michael, may I? Next to on that page 4 on the manager's office piece, there's this picture here. Wondering, was that an invited guest at the employee appreciation picnic?
We would never encourage the feeding of wildlife, Jack.
He was just waiting for his hamburger.
I know. He was sitting there at the grill before everyone arrived, and then later was on the library roof. So he was the one in the paper.
Oh.
This was 7:30. They put out the grill in the morning.
Yeah, you could smell it big time. Anyway, I thought it was pretty cute.
Cute picture.
He's not on staff, though.
No.
Not that we're aware of, yeah.
And we did not feed him.
Any further questions?
Make a comment. I think, in general, not in general, but in entirety, the staff are doing a great job. But I just want to signal out, because this reminded me when we talked about the translator board, Snowman's Village has new TV service, so free service, which is great, which they can then take advantage of, not only grassroots but CG11. And I watch that now since we've gotten that down Valley, which is great. But, Pat Bingham has done a great job in terms of the community relations, community outreach, in terms of some of the programming. And I just watched the other night her presentation with Lindsay Utter from our Open Space and Trails about looking at all the different options of the Rio Grande Trail. And it was a great way to quickly see and understand those options that the public is being invited to comment on and provide input. But it's, not only that, but of course the airport master plan and other issues. So I think it's a great service that we're providing to the public who may not normally gain this information except for maybe a quick article in the paper.
And George, if I could just build, thank you. And if I could just build also, the extra effort this year, we've tried to be really creative in communicating our road schedules and the road work that's being done. And Pat and GR have been able to get on local radio stations and have really done a lot of outreach with weekly ads and, coming here. So hopefully that's been reaching the public also.
Yeah, an informed public is an educated public, and it makes our job certainly a lot easier in terms of when we get questions asked of us.
Any further questions or comments from the board? Do we want to move on to Tom's section of this? This is the investment report.
Yeah, to address Jack's question.
Just introduce yourself, Tom.
Oh, sorry, Tom Oken, treasurer. If you'd like, basically in the memo of interest is just updating you periodically on what our investments are, and there's a schedule attached that shows our investments at the end of June, totaling approximately $100 million worth. The challenge we've had in investing that much is that banks, I think as I've explained to you before, we're limited to certain qualified banks in the state of Colorado that we can put deposits with or purchase certificates of deposit. And those banks have to pledge collateral against any public deposit from, any city, county, or the state, or special districts. And because of that, they don't have very much interest currently in public money. And so we have not been able to find enough banks to invest as much as we'd like to in CDs. And the reason for CDs is they historically for past several years have been paying a lot higher interest rate than our alternative, which is to buy U.S. Treasury or agency securities like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the Federal Farm Credit Bank, or stuff like that. And for instance, just last week we went to bid on CDs for 2-year and 3-year term, and the bid for a 2-year CD was 0.6%, and 3 years was close to 1%. In comparison, the agencies are yielding half of that. So 0.3% for 2 years and 0.5% approximately for 3 years. And our funds that we hold in the bank, and also we invest funds in what are called money market mutual funds, and another equivalent to a money market mutual fund is something called, within Colorado, a local government investment funds trust or something like that, but it's essentially a money market fund set up solely for governments in Colorado to use. Those, including our bank account, are yielding about 0.25%. So to get more than 0.25% in an agency, we actually have to go out and tie up funds for 2 years. And so they're just, that's not advantageous enough. As well, we break our portfolio into kind of a longer-term, more permanent portfolio that we don't expect to spend in the next 3 years or so. And the rest of it is a shorter-term portfolio where we're restricted to investments going out only 13 months. So that breakdown is about $20 million in our long-term portfolio, and the remainder, at this point in time, the end of June, about $80 million is in short-term. So in response to that, we typically have purchased agency securities on sort of a buy and hold to maturity strategy, which is, we buy them now, it matures in 3 years, and it pays us back, and it pays us 0.5% interest over that time period. Not so great. Another strategy with respect to these instruments is kind of called a total return strategy, which we have not practiced in the past. That is more of a trading approach to those securities, in which you're looking to take advantage of some volatility in the market because of the European bank crisis or whatever. Short-term rates do fluctuate, and so the price of those securities changes inversely with the direction of interest rates. So if interest rates go up momentarily, the price of those securities is falling, and that's an advantageous time to buy those securities. And maybe a month later or something, there's a flight to quality to U.S. Treasuries and agencies, and those interest rates come back down a little bit. The price of the security you hold has increased, and so it's advantageous to perhaps sell that security and replace it with another one. So you're not only getting interest, you're also sort of trading on the price, more like you would with a stock. You're looking for the price appreciation more than the dividend sometimes. So we don't practice that strategy historically because we don't have the expertise in-house to follow that. So the proposed strategy actually is for us to take about half of our long-term portfolio, $10 million, and use a broker that we've dealt with for 20 years or more, have experience with him, and use his advice with respect to good trading opportunities. And rely on him as well to look for opportunities for us to what they call swap securities, where essentially for an equivalent price, due to some inefficiencies in the pricing, he can present us opportunities to actually increase our yield by just selling one security and buying another one at the same time. So all of that is what we're proposing doing with $10 million of the portfolio. And, it wouldn't all be invested at once. We'd be moving in gradually, kind of averaging in so that we're not exposed to any, one-day exposure to whatever interest rates happen to be on that day. So that's the proposed strategy, Jack, and kind of a side benefit of that. Really, there's there's not really a potential downside to that because we would never sell at a loss. If interest rates, if we bought over the next 3 months and interest rates only moved up after that, well, the value of our holdings then, our $10 million of securities that we bought, would actually be declining, the price moving in the opposite direction. And so in that case, we just hold those securities to maturity and be doing what we had done in the past anyways. So the downside is if we bought a 3-year agency right now at 0.5%, most or the least return would be 0.5%. But by trading, we're trying to improve that return. And at least historically in the last year, again, and I may not have mentioned this before, but we have limited ourselves by policy to only buying 3-year securities at the most. And the reason for that is that the longer term you go on a bond, there's much more of a price swing given a change in interest rates. And that's because the maturity is that much further in the distance and we're only earning so much interest for a much longer period of time. So that's compensated more in the price of the security. So by staying to 3 years, we also kind of limit our downside in securities if we're trading them. And also towards, we don't know for sure that we might not be spending a lot of our fund balance out 3 years from now and might actually be tapping into some of these funds that are invested. So we don't want to have them invested out 10 years and have to sell them at a loss because we need the money or, just not have it available. So anyway, the final point with respect to the strategy is we're hoping that by not having to invest half of our, or $10 million of our long-term portfolio in CDs, we'll free up some capacity in the banks to buy shorter-term CDs for the current portion of the portfolio where we're restricted to 13 months in the last, and thereby get more than 0.25% on some of our shorter-term money, because otherwise our alternative is 0.25%. We aren't going to earn any more than that.
So are there any questions? Rachel?
Thank you for walking us through that. I guess I am concerned and would like to drill a little deeper down on the trading transactional type of investment strategy you just described. It sounds a lot like the ETFs, the exchange traded funds, that you can invest in as a private investor, and they are traded by whoever you have bought with on a daily basis to try to, beat the curve. But I frequently get notices in the mail to remind you that these are more volatile and more dangerous than other types of investments, and you may not receive all your principal back. And it sounded like there's a security here that if you have to and you hold it the full 3 years, you receive your interest plus the full original deposit back. So there's no reduction in value if at the end of the 3 years,
No, having limited ourselves to U.S. Treasury debt and agencies that are rated in the highest category, which have now, the big mortgage loan associations are not actually agencies or weren't agencies of the federal government, but were what are called government-sponsored entities. But because of how large they were and their relationship and oversight with the U.S. Treasury, their credit quality was equivalent essentially to buying a U.S. Treasury security. And even though Treasuries were downgraded a year ago by Standard & Poor's, they are still highly rated by Moody's and Fitch, two other rating agencies, and are still the gold standard, because what's better in the world than a U.S. Treasury? So that backing is implied behind the agencies, and they were in financial trouble and were bailed out by the U.S. Treasury. So with respect to the risk of getting your principal back, if you hold to maturity, that's the least credit risk we can take, is with those securities. We were moving into corporate commercial paper, it's called, which is short-term debt of General Motors and, whatever. There is potential risk that they might go bankrupt or whatever and not be able to pay you back. So there isn't any risk that way. When you're talking about exchange-traded funds, they are usually composed of a lot of different stocks. So it's a portfolio of stocks. Those obviously have a lot more risk. Our risk with respect to price is really relative to movements in interest rates. Short-term interest rates is really all that changes the price of the securities we'd be buying. So it's much more narrow, and our opportunity, to gain is much less as well. But there is some volatility in that market just because of all the events and are approaching the fiscal cliff and the election and all that stuff bounces interest rates around a little bit from week to week.
One kind of follow-up question on that, because this is a fairly significant change in policy direction for some of these investments. Is there going to be excessive fees for the sale and repurchase and commissions or churning that is in any way going to really diminish that potential upside of another 0.5% or anything?
No, and we'd only we'd be taking the fee into account in the trade, and so it would still have to be favorable even after the fee. Basically, because interest rates are so low, we are not paying this broker an investment advisory fee, which other firms would charge if they wanted to take your portfolio and manage it for you, or a portion of it. So where his firm will earn the money is basically when they buy and sell these securities, and these are so widely traded that the margin between what they buy it at and sell it to us is really slim. They aren't making a whole lot on that trade, but that's the profit they get. And unique to the brokerage firm that he's related with, and technically that's the approval we need here, is not so much of the strategy, but of the use of this brokerage firm, is it's what's called an independent broker. And what that means is that they don't really hold any inventory of securities themselves for their own investment or to sell you products, like if it's Merrill Lynch or something, there may be a Merrill Lynch mutual fund that they'd sell. Or they may have a position that they've taken in a lot of these agency securities, and so they're trying to sell you out of their portfolio what they have available. Instead, this brokerage company goes to a bunch of the other big brokerage firms and says, okay, we want to purchase off of your inventory. but they're trading at their level as they do between brokerage firms. And so they'll approach several brokerage firms if we're looking for a specific instrument, see what's available and get bids on that. And so generally, when we've been purchasing agencies on our own, we would see 3 bids from different brokers. And basically, they usually get 5 bids for all their trades. And they will document those for us of, here's what our actual pricing was, here's what we'll sell it to you at, and there's their skinny little markup, which is typical. So that's
That's the
how it
layout.
works. Yeah.
Thank you.
Rob and then George.
What, if any, capabilities and why or why not are we, as a government entity, able to borrow from ourselves, in the sense that we just went through a ballot initiative to bond something at probably, my guess is 3.5% for 25 years, which is going to be paid for based on a tax increase. It's, I would say those bonds are going to be probably AAA rated. And here we are now.
No, but
highly rated.
We're rated as well as the U.S. government by Standard & Poor's.
And
we are AA.
Here we are investing our cash balance, substantial cash balance, at 0.5% or 0.6%, or in some cases 0.25%. Why or why not are we able to use some of that and get 3% from our money by borrowing to ourselves?
We can, and we do if it's very short term. The difference is, as I was explaining, we don't invest in anything that matures more than 3 years out. So for the library, if we're selling 25-year bonds, we don't really want to tie up the county's funds for 25 years because we don't know if we're going to need it. Our portfolio isn't really equity of the county. It is fund balance, and it's short term, and a portion of it, as I explained in the memo, isn't even ours. Like, of this $100 million at the end of June, $14 million of it we owed right away to other taxing districts for property tax that we collected. So our minimal portfolio right now, our minimum is in the $60 million range, typically. But that includes the elected officials' transit committee funds, which are, I forget, $12 million or something like that. And they're building up towards the entrance to Aspen, but so might we spend all that within the next 3 years? Probably not, and so we count a portion of that as our long-term investable fund. But within 25 years, yeah, we'd hope so. So our funds aren't here to invest. Our funds are really here to be spent on public projects. And that's why we don't invest them for the long term.
And another reason, Rob, is you particularly in the long term, like Tom is saying, you have to be very careful about intermingling monies and funds so that you can't necessarily have the airport fund, for example, taking the risk on library debt in the future. Now, short-term cash gets moved around, but
and we did exactly that actually for open space. For the acquisition of the Drosty property, that required more cash right at the end of the year than the open space program had available. And so instead of issuing long-term bonds, we basically looked ahead and said, well, within the next year, the open space program from their property tax levy will collect enough to repay a loan. And so we went ahead and loaned from the general fund to the open space fund about $10 million, as I recall.
And I'm just curious why you can't take a short-term approach, because I'm sure just like the securities, those bonds go onto a bond market. We sell bonds for the library. They go onto a bond market. I would venture to say very few of those people hold that bond until maturity, 25 years. They're probably traded on a bond market somewhere on some sort of regular basis. So who's to say that we can't say, well, we're going to issue the bond basically 3 years down the road, but we're going to issue it to ourselves for a 3-year period of time and have the windfall of 3% interest on $5 million.
When we issue bonds, we issue what are called serial bonds for the most part, meaning that for this $5 million or so for the library that we might issue bonds for, a portion of that will be due a year from issuance. Another portion of the $5 million is due 2 years. And a larger portion is due 25 years from now. So, yes, we could buy the 1, 2, and 3 year bonds, but those are likely to be yielding even lower rates than agency rates, much lower than 6%, lower than, our 3-year bond right now would probably be yielding less than the 0.5% we could get in an agency. And the reason for that is, one, it's rated almost as secure, looked at that way. But secondly, the interest that we pay is exempt from federal, and if you're a state resident, state income tax. And so people are willing to take a lower tax-free interest rate because it converts into a higher taxable rate. So, on that basis, it's not advantageous for us to invest in our own debt that we issue. And there isn't that big of a market to really trade our debt, because we're a small issuer. We don't have all that much out, and so most of the purchasers of our debt do hold it to maturity.
Interesting.
I think the other drawback would be that the citizens wouldn't want us to be making that, they'd want the lowest. If we could actually get that yield, they're not going to want us to take the margin on that. So it gets into a very complicated public trust kind of thing that I don't think would be I don't know quite know. It wouldn't be a conflict of interest, but it would be
self-dealing.
It just wouldn't. It's hard enough just to issue those bonds and look for the best rate, much less if we were taking that margin. I just don't think it would work. But I see your point, but I just don't think as a government entity it would work. I don't want to be loaning to our public, quite frankly.
I think you're exactly right, Michael. If the argument was made, well, we can only get 1% on our money elsewhere, so we'll loan it to the library for 2%. Someone might say, well, why not just 1.5%? Why are you making money off the property tax question there? And it become a challenge. And I also see a challenge as if you weren't able to trade at a favorable rate, whether it's 3 years or 5 years out, because interest rates have risen so much, are you costing the taxpayers? So, it's always about, we're not gambling or able to take risk the same way a private individual might with their IRA or their investments.
One way of looking at it, though, is that we could get our average rate for our interest and only charge the public that lower rate. So let's say these bonds are issued, I'm using the library if it passes or whatever, but say $10 million, that's only $5 million. So to say something gets issued at 3% and we're only getting 0.5%, well, we could charge the public only 0.5%, which would bring that property tax down from the $460,000 a year. It would bring it down substantially to $300,000 a year.
I agree.
And let them have the windfall as opposed to us have the windfall. And then we would still get the same rate as our average rate. We're basically charging them our average
So
rate.
we would be locking into that average rate for 25 years instead of being able to ladder it back up when interest rates change in 3 years and get into...
And not if they're marketable bonds, because then you would sell them on a bond market and the rate would change at the point of the interest. You'd settle them just like the securities. I mean, we're only taking advantage of that security things when there's a windfall to it. Otherwise, we're
But if we're
stuck in those.
If we're purchasing a 25-year bond, and and where are we thinking interest rates are going to be a few years from now if we need that? They'll probably be higher than they are right now. Well,
it gets back to the long-term
we then
question.
lose money
Yeah, the bonds would
if
be
we
less.
have to sell that bond.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just interesting how.
Yeah, as a
Anyway.
practical matter, we can't issue. So if we were to do what you're saying, we would just have an inter-fund kind of loan, and maybe it's tied to whatever interest we're earning. So there's no guarantee of what that looks like over the long term. We can't issue bonds that are marketable, and so that would just be an inter-fund loan. And the two pieces of that are the fungibility and also uncertainty, because as you go out over a longer term, you can't guarantee what those investment returns are necessarily going to be.
And we actually have better alternative investments than our own bonds because they yield less than taxable bonds.
But it's worth exploring. Thanks for the question. Any further questions for Tom? Yes, George.
Sort of on a similar note, but you may have the same answer. We don't invest in municipal bonds for that same reason.
Correct.
Because of the length of time. Yeah.
Well, and because interest rates are lower on municipal bonds than U.S. Treasuries or agency securities or CDs that we might invest in.
Yes, Chad.
Yeah, Tom, so let me get a handle on, as far as cash flow, we have at the peak of mill levy revenues, about 101, whatever, end of year, 65 million. What determines the long versus short term? Because what this money is for operations, projects, and contingency, the 4 million. And then, of course, a few set-asides like the housing, et cetera. But what in terms of time, is it 3 years makes it long-term? Up to 3 years?
Yeah, what we actually do is we look at the fund balance in the various funds for the county that we're holding, like the transit fund with 12 million. And we look at that and we say, what's the likelihood we're going to spend that within 3 years, or a portion of it, and if we're not going to spend it for 3 years, we don't think, then we would count that portion of that fund balance as available for the longer term investments to be invested out 3 years. But, so we look at, you mentioned the housing funds. Well, right now I wouldn't count those as long-term past 3 years because we're looking at starting to spend them. We have general fund balance. Well, we're starting to spend down some of that, accelerating some capital projects and so forth. So anyway, that's the analysis we go through, and the amount that is long-term is about $20 million.
So that is a variable. How frequently do you look at that? Quarterly or
Once a
annually?
year. Yeah. Yeah, because pretty much our lowest fund balance is usually around the end of the year. So we just take our financial statements and look at the fund balances at the end of the year. to decide, what we can do with that.
Okay, and as far as definition of securities, what kind of instruments are they? Are they all bonds?
Bonds or notes, but yeah.
Currency type.
They're all debt securities, so they're all loans. We're loaning money, and there's a promise to repay plus interest is the basic loan structure. So these are all debt securities. And there's a state statute we work under that defines the specific agency securities that public entities in the state can invest in. So that's our list. And the state statute would authorize investments in commercial paper and other stuff, but then we have to get into credit analysis of how creditworthy is it, and we don't have the expertise to do that, and we don't need to take the additional risk to get a little more yield. It's just
risk is
not in
important.
our interest.
So on that risk question, is there any way that we could lose? Say we have another 09, when actually 08 in the fall, and then the spring of 09, everything, stock market, across the board, went a minimum of 40% down. I don't have any idea, I don't remember how bonds,
Actually,
those kind of securities.
Bonds went up because the strategy, one of the strategies in there was
there was no inflation.
The Federal Reserve went to lower interest rates to try to stimulate the economy. They were lending money, bailing out all the big institutions. All that was to keep interest rates at a low level. So actually, with respect to debt securities, a lot of them appreciated, unless, it was General Motors debt. Yeah, and, until the bailout there, just because of the risk, increase in risk, interest rates on those securities would have gone up.
But if you keep to maturity, though, I have a layman's knowledge here. If you keep these kind of instruments to maturity, they're guaranteed to pay. I'm not talking about
The principal.
Right. 9/11 happening 3 times over, but under what has been a typical financial world of 70 years or so, whatever. Just keep it.
Yeah, Jack, I think that the bigger risk, and I think part of what Tom's strategy helps manage for, is if you get locked into an investment for too long a period of time and we start to see inflationary pressures coming out of a recovery. And I think what Tom's suggesting keeps us a little bit more agile in terms of adjusting our investment portfolio. Is that a fair assessment? So it's not so much default risk as much as getting locked into low return rates, then having inflationary pressures that make the actual value of those dollars negative. Does that make sense?
A lot of us are addressing this from sort of a personal investment point of view, and it's actually a completely different strategy, it seems to me, based on government investment and government longevity. So you have an entity that's been in existence since 1880, based on short-term, and I don't actually know what their investment policies back then were, but you have a very long-term lived institution. It's not a corporation, it's a government institution, and that its lifetime is expected to go essentially in perpetuity. And so you can't really address that kind of longevity with the kind of investment strategies that we as individuals have. It's a completely different goal and strategy. So that's the difficulty I think we're struggling with. Any further questions for Tom?
So you need
We need a consent to move forward.
Technically, yeah, our investment policy just says that before we can use a broker-dealer who is not a what are they called, a primary dealer with the Federal Reserve. We need board consent to do that, so that, we've done our due diligence with respect to that firm, and actually, this firm is positioned quite well because they aren't trading on their own account substantially, which is what has gotten, some of the big banks and the big brokerage firms in trouble, where they lose whatever it is, $500 billion on a series of trades. This firm that we're using does not do that, doesn't engage in that, so they don't have that risk.
So do we just need a nod of heads for this investment policy? And I see a nod of heads. Yes, Jack? Yes, you agree with this? So you don't object to it?
Well, I don't object to it. Proof in the pudding is what you'll see in budget, so. Okay.
I was just, maybe to give you a little comfort, I was just going to ask that we get a read back on how this seems to be working out after 6 months of implementation. I know you report to us regularly, but it is a little bit of a change, and so it'd be nice to kind of get an idea.
Yeah. Is that okay with the rest of the board? Jack?
Yeah, so, it's hard to remember history, but I remember what happened at City Hall with Dallas Everhart. And I don't remember the facts of what they were investing in California.
No.
But I remember that, so I'm, well, Jack, are you going to go, yeah? I'm kind of reserved right now because I don't know all the possibilities, though Tom has given a fair, certainly, assessment.
Well, we definitely give you they turned into about 3 times a year budget updates where we go through revenues and such, and so we can track through those updates how this is working out.
Okay, so we've given Tom the nod. Thank you,
All right,
Tom.
thank you.
What's the other item here?
The last item is that we've had 2 resignations from the Translator Advisory Board. Staff was recommending before we start advertising that we move. We had a regular position and an alternate position, both resign. We have an alternate who you recently appointed, Jessica Robison, who's in an alternate position. Before we started advertising, we wanted to recommend moving her into a regular position and advertising the 2 alternate positions.
Yes, Rich.
Well, I think it obviously must be a typo because in the memo it says Jessica Garrow. She is running for CU Regent, deserves everyone's support, but I think it must have been on our memo writer's mind because they did not put Jessica Robinson there. I was kind of wondering if she wasn't getting a little overcommitted there when I saw it.
Yes, I should have got that too, actually, but no, it's Jessica Robinson who you recently appointed. She's up in the Meredith area, and I think she's been a good participant so far, even as an alternate.
Excellent.
She would move to the vacant, and we'd put it.
We had advertised
for 2 alternates.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Rachel?
Yeah, I'm interested in that, and maybe my memory is failing me, but it seemed that we might have had more applicants for advisory board than we had seats last time we were doing interviews, and it might be worth...
I don't think we're translating.
I don't think we're translating.
Okay, but I'd just like to double check and see if there's anyone who we had turned down who had applied recently we might reconsider as well.
I got an email.
Yes, George.
Do we normally send those who go off aboard a letter of thank you? Jeff Beer certainly has served well. Doug Luke's really just got on, but he never really was able to attend because of medical. But, Jeff has served well. We should acknowledge that.
We can certainly.
Just like we thank all our volunteers as they move off the boards.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the nod of heads to appoint Jessica Robison to the translator regular board member, and then seek applications for the 2 alternate seats. Okay?
I believe that's it for No ayes.
We have future agendas.
Yeah, future agendas. Actually, I want to start off with our now immediate, maybe even past future, which is a reminder that we do have the Pro Challenge bike race coming into Aspen tomorrow. We have already seen road closures. It started 2 hours ago right around Pepke Park. At 6 o'clock tonight, Main Street will be closed between Aspen and Garmisch. And then starting at 6 in the morning, Main Street will be closed from 2nd to Original Street, and the pass will be closing starting at 10:30 in the morning. The pass will be opening again at 6 o'clock on Wednesday, but will be closed again Thursday morning from 8 a.m. to 2:30 for the start. It's going to be a lot of energy in town. We encourage people to come visit and see the event, but for those who are going to be traveling, you should maybe check out www.aspenupcc.com for road closures and changes in bus routes. So as a result, the board will not be having its regular meeting tomorrow. The other thing that we should note is that the board tomorrow will be defending its crown in the bicycle race against City Council. I think everyone got an email that they'll be collecting at 1:45 at the corner of Galena and Main. And do we have 4 people who are participating in that at this point?
I've been trying to talk George.
I'll be happy to sit in for Rachel.
Take my place. I just, those pedals got going so fast last time I had to pull my feet up with the powerhouse team of Rob and John in the back. But I commend Jack as being an able steering body and with the team great success.
Well, we have our 4 people, and hopefully we'll do everyone proud.
John, let me ask you about the race. Last year we talked about a helicopter, and I don't recall us talking about that this year. But I assume that the same thing is happening.
There is a similar process happening. We brought that because it was the first time we were dealing with it in the permit process. And the permitting process is an administrative process. There wasn't a lot of change other than providing some redundancy with higher flying aircraft to make sure that the signals come through. They had some difficulty with the signals last year, but in terms of the impacts from the helicopter, it was not an appreciable change, or really a change that I'm aware of from what we approved last year. But yes, there will be a helicopter that will be filming, and it is under the exact same restrictions and requirements as it was last year. On other future agenda items, I've got a number of them to go through with you. August 28th, we had scheduled or rescheduled the tour of the hospital for board members that were interested at 3:30. We just got notice today that this time the hospital had to cancel that, which leaves not a whole lot on the schedule that day. I think what we'll probably do is look at maybe moving the exec to the afternoon and either doing everything in the morning or everything in the afternoon, so we don't split the day up in the middle there. A reminder that on September 4th, we will not have a quorum, so we'll be canceling that meeting. That should have been September 10th, I think. We had scheduled a meeting with Gunnison County, but we're only going to have 3 of 5 commissioners present. We're still working now to reschedule that for either October 1st or 8th, and we're still hoping that the Gunnison County commissioners will be willing to come over this way.
Question. Do we offer to meet them in Redstone to make that trip easier for them?
We haven't, but that's certainly something we could put on the table. I'm assuming everyone wants to come and go to Woody Creek Tavern, but we'll check with them.
Well, Redstone Inn is sort of a neat place to go for lunch.
Well, but we can put that on the table.
Saves them a long, it's a long trip and saves them
Yeah.
an hour.
Yeah, at least an hour.
Okay, well, we can put that on the table.
A question about the cancellation was the 4th you're talking about.
Yes, the 4th, we do not have a quorum, so that was canceled. We're taking the items that were on the 4th. GR had an item and the Forest Service, and moving those to September 11th. And you'll see that on there.
So is there going to be transportation for the Maroon Creek unveiling, plaque unveiling at noon?
We can certainly arrange for that.
What day is that? I'm sorry, the September 11th?
That's Monday, September 10th.
Yeah.
So we'll arrange for that.
Yeah,
Rachel?
John, I was just wondering, as you talked about the previous meeting with the hospital having canceled, would it make sense for GR's item or any of those items to move back to fill that day up as opposed to moving out to the 11th?
We could look at that. We actually just got notice right before the meeting, so I
Sure.
hadn't thought about that, but we could...
I'm just thinking, because I know as we get into budget and other things, we get pretty full, so I would just look at taking advantage of the hospital having canceled.
Okay.
Michael?
Yes.
I'm just, looking through this future plan, I don't see anything, and I thought there was something at one point on our housing mitigation fund and getting a report back from the realtor that we've hired and where we're going with that.
Yep, that is, she is working, we've got a employee group that's working with her, put together a portfolio of proposed purchases that come back in executive session. And so we haven't scheduled that date with them yet. I know they're previewing some properties right now and trying to get an idea of what kind of proposal they're going to be putting together.
But at one point, wasn't there discussion about a work session about conveying to her what our goals for the purchases are, and not necessarily an executive of looking at specific negotiations or purchases, but I remember in the interview, at least, it was, well, the first thing she wanted to do was to determine what the board's goals for her were.
Right, and based on our previous discussions, where the board had identified some criteria, we thought that the discussion might be more productive if we saw what was actually on the market that fit within those criteria, and then you could help us narrow down from there. Versus, I think the thing that we've been missing at the table is that kind of information.
And I guess the balance between exec under purchase or negotiation and work session of policy of what we're actually looking for are two different things, because one I think is good for exec, the other I really think is a public conversation.
You're absolutely right. I think you've given us some of that guidance, and now it's about, I think, because we want to use properties that we may actually want to look at purchasing, we would do that in exec.
Okay. Thank you.
Just real quick, September 18th, you'll see we have an update on our broadband. I told you that was going to be coming in September. We do have that scheduled. And then September 25th, we had originally scheduled to meet with the Eagle County Commissioners. They also contacted us today to tell us that they've got some conflicts and are going to need to reschedule that. We're going to work on a new date. We don't have one right now. But we thought that it may be good if we're not doing that with Eagle County on the 25th to go ahead and do it to host our board appreciation picnic, which we usually do in the evening, since we already had an evening planned at that point, starting at 5.
Yes, George.
I asked this last week, and I still don't see this on here. If we want to have a discussion on the hedonic presentation.
I still haven't heard from John how he wants to bring that back, so.
I don't want to wait 3 months.
Yeah. Okay, maybe that opened up time on Tuesday or...
Well, we could also probably have a discussion even during open discussion, George, to bring it back even today if the board wanted, or if you wanted more information in front of you.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yes, Rachel.
You know, for me, I'd rather do it when John Ely's had a little more of a heads up than just throwing it out there today. But again, with the cancellation Tuesday with the hospital tour, maybe that's an opportunity. The one thing I saw on future agendas is Monday, September 24th for the site visit to Lanedo. And that is one of the fourth Mondays of the month when they have the 1177 Colorado River Basin Roundtable meeting in Glenwood Springs. They've canceled the August meeting for that, so there won't be one next Monday, which means that the September one will be more important to attend and go to. So there'll be a report on where things are going with the IBCC. So, you know, one or the other, we can either reschedule it as a group or I can just miss the site visit, but I do have an obligation.
Yes, Jack.
Do you want us to work on rescheduling that, I guess?
Well, if y'all wouldn't mind, looking at August 28th, and it's really, obviously, an hour and a half has dropped off. This week, we're having an exec session. Typically, we don't have exec sessions 2 weeks in a row. I don't know if this is a special one. So, and Rachel brought up for Lanedo, hey, the weather's good. I wonder if we could do Lanedo. I mean, there's not prep, meaning a memo going out for this. I'd like to be able to use some of this time.
Well, we've been putting stuff in to potentially the 28th now to use some of that.
Oh, you have new other stuff to fill in?
Well, just that we've talked about
Hedonic,
today.
which is
Well, there were two others.
a long conversation.
George?
Yeah, we need that exec session on August 28th regarding one of the property acquisition contracts with open space.
Okay.
That's 2 hours, so. Anyway, I'd rather just do a bunch of work on normal work hours, quote unquote, anywhere from 10 to 5 and fill the days, and if not, 1 to 5, if we have to shift off of that morning stuff, that's okay too. I hate things piling up later on because budget's on the way.
But won't a site visit to Lanedo take about 3 hours? I mean,
It'll
a substantial part of the day. So I'm not sure that we can just stick it in anywhere. Rachel?
Yeah, if we started earlier on the 24th and I was able to, leave the Woody Creek area by, say, noon, I can make the 1 o'clock down there. So if we started that site visit leaving here at 9 on that Monday the 24th or something like that, then it could work. I just can't do it with starting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So, that could be shifted if it works for others.
Would that work for... So let's go ahead and get that.
Okay.
That's all I had on future agendas.
Anyone else have any future agenda items? We covered them all? It looks like we've covered them all. Does that leave us ahead of time? Not really. Not a lot. So we're scheduled for an executive session at 2:45.
Open discussion. That's the word.
Oh, we have open discussion. I'm sorry. I looked at the highlighted ones in my board. John, do you have things for open discussion?
Actually, my two big updates are not necessarily updates or discussion points we're going to be covering in exec, so I'd leave it to the board for open discussion.
Board open discussion. George?
John, we were going to...
I thought that was...
we're going to have Ellen draft, get a letter of support for Senator Bennett's draft.
Yeah, I've got to see where they're at on that, because it's not in our packet today, obviously.
Right.
But it is on the radar screen to be doing.
And yes, Rachel?
Yeah, I know that from when our agendas are printed, sometimes to when we get to executive session, different items are posted and added. And I wasn't sure, are we going to be discussing Thompson and Divide at all today? I had a few items I'd like to bring to the board's attention if possible.
It was not, we had 3 items on there, and one was kind of truncated in the agenda. One was talking about potential negotiations on 2 IGAs. We have a discussion on the salt install contract, and then we had negotiations on Sooty Two Shoes. We could talk to John about whether we could add. We didn't have anything on Thompson Devise today.
Okay. Yeah, again, it would just be a very brief update. I realize time is tight, but if it's possible, I'd like to be able to share with the board.
And then there is one other open discussion item that Phyllis just reminded me of. We had 2 applicants, I believe, for the animal shelter, the joint appointment for the animal shelter board with the city. We had forwarded those 2 names to the city. They have responded to us that the city would like to appoint Roberta Taliska. We were happy with both candidates and said we would be happy to appoint either one. And I believe we agreed that we would appoint as our representative, because we had our representative in a joint appointment, the other applicant. And so we will go ahead and prepare a resolution then to appoint Bobby as our joint, and then I don't have the other name in front of me. Yasmin, thank you, as our appointee to the Animal Shelter Board.
Is that okay? Good. Any other open discussion? So we'll return here at 2:45 for an executive session. George?
Oh, should we just go into exec now so grassroots can leave?
No.
I think we need to get it on the tape with the proper...
it's scheduled for 2:45. We are in special session. And so when we come back, do you want to do it on screen?
I don't think we have to, because in the morning we don't do it on screen.
You already we never adjourned our
special
session, so that is what you typically have to get on.
So if anybody comes wanting to be in the executive session, you're out of luck. So we'll have that at 2:45.
Very good.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you.